Chapter 460. Under the strange expression of the war army, Yi Xian left and disappeared not far away. On the city wall, the woman said softly, "Soul separation and body coordination. Interesting." Then she looked at the middle-aged man. "Did you teach him?" The middle-aged man shook his head. "No." The woman nodded slightly. "He must have comprehended it himself. It's beyond my expectations." Then she frowned slightly and turned to look at the far end. The next moment she disappeared. Mr. Bai hesitated for a while but chose not to follow in the end. Soon the woman came to a river. Beside the river, a woman with a small cloth bag was painting on the water. Above the river, there was a white flower. Pure white. This woman was the painter. The painter looked at the woman walking over and smiled. "Wei Yang, we meet again." Wei Yang Tian looked at the painter with a cold expression. "What are you doing here?" The painter smiled. "Painting." Wei Yang Tian stared at the painter for a long time. In the end, she turned and left. The painter suddenly said, "Wei Yang, aren't you going to talk to the Mo clan?" Wei Yangtun sneered. "Talk? There are 108,000 corpses at the Great Wall of Sky Burial. Among them are your friends. You want me to talk to them? Talk about what?" The painter said softly, "More will die." Wei Yang Tian turned and looked at the painter. "Painter, you should ask the one from the Mo clan and see if he's willing to listen to you." Then she turned and disappeared. By the river, the painter sighed softly and turned back to continue painting. As she painted, she seemed to be a little annoyed and waved her right hand lightly. Boom! The entire river evaporated instantly. The painter shrugged and turned to leave. Great Wall of Sky Burial. Inside the stone house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. Healing. Yi Xian returned to the war army's stone house and started to heal. In his mind, the scene of his battle with the man replayed. Ancient secret technique. He knew that his opponent was using an ancient secret skill. It had to be said that this ancient secret skill was quite terrifying, especially the opponent's speed. It was so fast that it could only be described as terrifying. It could be said that the other party's speed was almost the same as the speed of his flying sword. If it wasn't for the fact that he had comprehended the soul technique, he definitely wouldn't have been able to do anything to his opponent. Strong. The people he met were getting stronger and stronger. At this time, Soul's voice suddenly sounded, "Young lord, can you let me have a look at that ancient secret technique?" Yi Xian said, "Of course." As he spoke, he handed the ancient secret art to little Soul. After a while, Soul said in a low voice, "This isn't an ancient secret art at all. It can only be considered an ordinary secret art. A true ancient secret art can draw upon the chi of heaven and earth and the origin of the galaxy. When used, it can destroy a small world at will. As for the one before us, it can only be considered a secret technique." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Little Soul, do you know the cultivation method of the ancient secret technique?" Soul said, "I don't know." Yi Xian, Soul said again, "The cultivation method of the ancient secret art is very rare and difficult for ordinary people to obtain. Although I have a high status in the netherworld race and can obtain it, I'm just a sword. What do I need the ancient secret art for? Therefore, I don't have it either, hee." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. What did this hee mean? Soul said, "Young lord, you can cultivate this secret art. Once you successfully cultivate it, it will be of great help to you. For example, the speed of your flying sword can increase by more than several times in an instant." Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "Will there be any backlash?" "This chapter is not finished, please turn the page." Soul said, "Of course there will be. This kind of low-level secret art has a great backlash. If you use it, your body will be extremely weak, and at that time, you will be like an ordinary person." Yi Xian was silent. As expected, this kind of thing still had side effects. Because the man's strength increase was really a bit terrifying, and this kind of terrifying improvement was not normal at all. Soul said again, "This kind of secret art is generally used to save one's life, and that man just now, because of his special physique, when he uses the secret art, the backlash will be reduced. If young lord successfully cultivates it, remember not to use it casually." Yi Xian said in a low voice, Is my physique very ordinary? Soul said, Not very ordinary, it's very, very ordinary. Yi Xian's face suddenly darkened. He now found that this soul really didn't know how to chat. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly frowned. Because he still remembered that when he first met the woman in the plain dress, she said he had some kind of natural Dao body. Although he didn't know what kind of physique it was, it sounded like it should be a special physique. Why did Soul say his physique was ordinary? Moreover, along the way, no one had said that his physique was good. Could it be that the woman in the plain dress had hidden her physique? Thinking of this, Yi Xian increasingly felt that this was the case. Not chatting with this soul who didn't know how to chat, he began to continue to heal. As for the secret art, he decided to put it aside for now because he didn't want to bite off more than he could chew. Now, he just wanted to cultivate his soul. About an hour later, Yi Xian's injuries were almost recovered. Then he directly went out of the stone house, left the great wall of burial sky, and went straight to the Moke clan. Every time, it was someone else who came to find him, which made him very unhappy. Moreover, he was now extremely eager to fight. Only fighting could let him find his own shortcomings, and only in this way could he better improve himself. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was the war army. The war army looked at Yi Xian. You want to go to the Moke clan? Yi Xian nodded. The war army asked, Do you know where the Moke clan is? Yi Xian shook his head. The war army smiled and said, I'll take you there. Yi Xian looked at the war army. I want to go to the Moke clan. The war army said, If you don't go to the Moke clan, then I won't go with you. Let's go. If we go one-on-one, the Moke clan won't gang up on us. Yi Xian thought about it and then said, Let's go. Hearing this, the war army grinned. Let's go. Have you forgotten me? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind the two of them. The two of them heard the voice and looked. The person who came was Baldy. Baldy walked in front of the two of them and said with a smile, Have you forgotten me? Yi Xian smiled and said, How could that be? Let's go. Let's go to the Moke clan and let me see the genius of the Moke clan. After that, the three of them quickly disappeared not far away. Just after the three of them disappeared, Ague and Mr. Bai suddenly appeared on the scene. Ague said, Not going to stop them? Mr. Bai said softly, Why should we stop them? The Moke clan and the foreign land dared to come to our place. Why can't our people go to their place? Ague said in a deep voice, That kid has a temper. Mr. Bai nodded. He's not bad. At least he's not bad. If we met him earlier and trained him, his strength might not be weaker than Bai Yi. Ague wanted to say something but stopped. Mr. Bai asked with a smile, What do you want to say? Ague said softly, This kid is usually very slippery. He's not like a swordsman. But if he goes all out, he's still very powerful. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page, Mr. Bai said with a smile. What are you trying to say? Ague said in a deep voice, Sir, as far as I know, many forces in the never-ending starfield are eyeing his treasure. They want him to use it to fight against the Moke clan. Mr. Bai nodded. Ague looked at Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai said softly, They want the Palace Lord to step in. Ague asked, What does the Palace Lord think? Mr. Bai said softly, The Palace Lord hasn't made a decision yet. Ague's face darkened. If the Palace Lord takes the treasure, it means that he will definitely die, right? Mr. Bai nodded. Ague was about to say something when Mr. Bai said softly, Don't worry. Think about it. With the Palace Lord's pride, why would she snatch that kid's treasure? Besides, the Palace Lord knows very well that if it did not follow that kid willingly, how could that kid subdue it? Besides, this treasure carries karma. If an outsider gets his hands on it, it might be a disaster. Then he looked at Ague. Although the Palace Lord has no intention of snatching that treasure, I'm afraid that some people will act first and report later, Ague said in a deep voice. How dare they? Mr. Bai said softly, To them, if the kid is killed, the Palace Lord will not take revenge on them for a dead person. A dead genius is not a genius. He is worthless. Do you understand? Ague was silent. Mr. Bai said, Follow him secretly during this period. Don't let anyone do anything stupid. Ague nodded and left quietly. Mr. Bai was silent for a moment. Then, he turned to look at a place not far away. A middle-aged man in a black robe was walking slowly toward him. The black-robed middle-aged man smiled. "Old Bai, long time no see." Then, he waved his right hand and a table appeared in front of them. On the table, there was a pot of wine and 2 wine glasses. Mr. Bai said calmly, "I heard you went to the foreign territory." The middle-aged man nodded. "I went to the foreign territory. I have to say, some of the old guys in the foreign territory are very powerful." Then, he picked up the wine glass on the table and pointed it at Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai also picked up his glass. The two looked at each other and drank it in one gulp. The middle-aged man laughed and said, "I haven't fought with you for a long time. How about we exchange a few blows today?" Mr. Bai said calmly, "There's no hurry. There will be a chance very soon. Isn't that right?" The middle-aged man smiled. "That's true. We will have a good fight very soon." Then, he turned to look not far away. "Is that kid your disciple?" Mr. Bai shook his head. The middle-aged man said, "He beats Wuxia up like that. That's impressive." Mr. Bai said, "Mo Xiao, your Mo clan has secretly trained many geniuses. First Xianxia and Disha, then Wuxia and Mo Xie." Mo Xiao smiled. "You've met him?" Mr. Bai nodded. Mo Xiao smiled. "Not bad, right? Let me tell you, he is the most outstanding person in our Mo clan apart from the clan leader. No, even that clan leader might not be better than him." Then he looked at Mr. Bai. "Actually, if your disciple was still alive, she would have been able to compete with Mo Xie." Unfortunately, Mr. Bai's face darkened. Then Mo Xiao laughed. All right. Let's not talk about her. I'll treat you to a drink another day." Then he turned around and left. Mr. Bai didn't say anything for a long time. He didn't leave. P.S. Have you guys realized something strange? When you dream other than erotic dreams, you'll forget all other dreams the next day. End of this chapter. Chapter 461. After Yi Xian and the other two crossed the vast plains, they soon saw a huge canyon. At the entrance of the canyon, there were 2 tall mountains that looked like 2 gates. Between the 2 mountains, they could vaguely see a magnificent hall. Yi Xian looked at the hall and whispered, "Mo clan?" The war army nodded. However, this should not be their lair. As for where their lair is, only the palace lord knows. Baldy whispered, "Although they are enemies, I have to say that this clan is really admirable. Since I came here, I have never seen anyone in their clan afraid of death." Yi Xian smiled. "Let's go." Soon, the 3 of them came to the canyon. Along the way, Yi Xian found that several divine senses swept over the 3 of them, but no one came out to stop them. Under the canyon, Yi Xian looked into the distance and smiled slightly, seeking death. His voice was like thunder, shaking the world. Seeking death. Next to Yi Xian, the war army's mouth twitched slightly. "Brother Yi, aren't you being too arrogant?" Yi Xian said seriously, "You have to shout out your aura first, understand?" "Aura." The war army thought about it and said, "It seems so." On the top of the mountain, a man suddenly appeared, and beside him, there was a black Qilin. The evil Qilin glanced at Yi Xian and the other 2 below, and its eyes were full of hostility. It was about to rush down. At this moment, the man gently stroked its head, and it immediately lay down. The man smiled slightly, then looked at Yi Xian below and whispered, "Swordsman." At this moment, Wuxia, Sky Fiend, and Earth Fiend also came behind the man. In addition, there was a woman with short red hair, and her eyes were like knives, extremely cold. Wuxia whispered, "Shall I go meet him?" The man shook his head. He turned his head and looked at the mountain peak in front of him. There were 3 people standing there, 2 women and 1 man. The one in the lead was a man dressed in a black robe, and there was a strange aura floating around him. Behind the man, the red-haired woman said coldly, "I don't like these guys from the other side." Xianxia said, "I don't like it either." Wuxia shook her head and smiled, not saying a word. The man whispered, "Then leave the swordsman to them." A red-haired woman snorted coldly. That swordsman has a treasure on him. Why would he give it to them? The man glanced at the red-haired woman and said with a smile, "Ah Feng, which do you think is more important, a supreme treasure or the entire clan?" The woman called Ah Feng spoke in a low voice. "Our Mo clan doesn't need to rely on outsiders." The man said softly, "I need it." Everyone looked at the man, who said softly, "The world only knows that the never-ending star domain's never-ending heavenly palace lord is invincible. In fact, there is another person in the never-ending star domain who is also very powerful." Ah Feng asked, "Who?" The man said softly, "Painter." If our clan wants to completely occupy the never-ending star domain, we must defeat two people. One of them is the never-ending heavenly palace lord, and the other is this person. Ah Feng was expressionless. They were just born earlier than us. If we were in the same generation, why would we be afraid of them? The man smiled and said, "What you said is not unreasonable." At that moment, Zuoqing suddenly said, "They've attacked." Everyone looked down. Below, a man had already appeared in front of Yi Xian and the other two. However, it was not the black-robed man who led the group, but another man holding a spear. The man with the spear walked in front of Yi Xian and the other two. War Army and Baldi retreated to the side. The man suddenly struck with his spear. The spear was as fast as lightning, pointing straight at the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. And when his spear was a few inches away from Yi Xian's eyebrows, Yi Xian suddenly turned sideways and then moved forward. He took a quick step forward, and at the same time, he drew his sword and slashed. Buzz! The sound of the sword resounded, shaking heaven and earth. As the sword slashed down, the man with the spear lightly tapped the ground with his toes, and his entire body floated backward. Yi Xian's sword missed, and at that moment, the man with the spear suddenly leaped up and smashed down with his spear. He was extremely fast, and he instantly arrived above Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian dodged sideways, and the man's spear hit nothing, but soon he swung his right hand, and the spear swung toward Yi Xian's position. Yi Xian raised his sword to block. Bang! With a swing of the spear, Yi Xian retreated repeatedly, and the man was about to take advantage of the situation to pursue. However, at that moment, his expression changed drastically, and he instinctively raised his spear to block. Boom! There was an explosion, and the man instantly retreated. Before he could stop, Yi Xian appeared in front of him, and then, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. The man's pupils constricted slightly, and he stabbed the spear in his right hand into the ground. Bang! The ground trembled, and in the next moment, a powerful spear aura shot up from the ground and enveloped Yi Xian. At the same time, he stomped his right foot back, and his spear stabbed forward. Everywhere the tip of the spear passed, space was directly torn apart. This time, Yi Xian didn't choose to dodge the spear, and he slashed down with his sword when the spear arrived in front of him. It was a tit for tat. The tip of the spear and the blade collided, bang! An explosion resounded, and at the same time, the two of them retreated repeatedly. However, in the next moment, they charged at each other again. On the peak of the mountain, the man beside Zuoqing said softly, "He's training." Zuoqing nodded. "What do you think of him?" The man smiled. "I haven't seen his true strength, so I won't give an evaluation." As he spoke, he looked at Zuoqing. "You fought him. How do you feel?" Zuoqing fell silent for a moment, and then she said, "His sword is very fast." The man smiled. "Nothing else?" Zuoqing smiled lightly. "That's enough." The man nodded slightly. "That's true." As he spoke, he looked down at Yi Xian and said softly, "Actually, I'd like to meet that woman who was said to be invincible in the same realm of cultivation all those years ago." Tian Sha's expression instantly changed when he heard this. The man said, "Tian Sha, Zuoqing, Ah Feng, and I were all cultivating in the outside world all those years ago, and only you've come into contact with her. What sort of person is she?" Tian Sha fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "She's a person that instills fear in others." The man chuckled. "That's quite a pity." Tian Sha shook his head and didn't say anything. In next to no time, numerous explosions resounded from below, and the battle between Yi Xian and the spear-wielding man was already in full swing. Moreover, based on the situation of the battle, both of them seemed to be on par. Bang! Meanwhile, Yi Xian and the spear-wielding man suddenly split apart. After the spear-wielding man stopped, he looked at Yi Xian who stood nearby, and his expression was extremely cold. "You're using me as a sparring partner." Yi Xian said, "You don't mind, right?" The spear-wielding man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "I mind very much." As soon as he finished speaking, the spear in his hand suddenly started trembling violently, and it seemed like he was about to release some sort of ultimate attack. However, right at this moment, a strand of imperceptible sword light flashed. The spear-wielding man's expression instantly changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly stopped and raised his spear to block in front of him. Bang! The spear-wielding man retreated explosively over 100 m back, and he hadn't even stopped when Yi Xian had appeared in front of him. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword, causing the spear-wielding man's expression to change drastically, and he was about to counterattack. However, a strand of sword light suddenly pierced through the center of his forehead. The spear-wielding man's body stiffened, and only now did he notice that Yi Xian hadn't drawn his sword at all. At this moment, he finally understood that drawing his sword was an illusion, and the flying sword was the real deal. Yi Xian pulled out the storage ring on the spear-wielding man's finger, and then he looked up. "Anyone else?" On the mountain peak, the man beside Wuxia smiled and said, "Interesting." Wuxia said solemnly, "His sword is even faster than before." Behind them, the woman named Ah Feng suddenly said, "I'll go." As she spoke, she was about to go down, but she was stopped by the spear-wielding man. Ah Feng looked at the spear-wielding man. "Xia, I won't allow someone from the never-ending starfield to be so arrogant in front of us." Xia said softly, "Stand down." The woman named Ah Feng snorted coldly, turned around, and left. Wuxia shook her head and smiled. "What a temper!" Xia looked into the distance. On the mountain peak, the black-robed man and the woman behind him hadn't moved. Xia smiled and said, "Brother Nanli, if you don't make a move, the Mok clan will make a move, and everything he has will belong to the Mok clan." The black-robed man looked at Xia and didn't say anything. A moment later, he suddenly vanished, and when he appeared again, he was already in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's heart shook when he saw the black-robed man, and he secretly raised his guard. The black-robed man said softly, "Let me see how fast your sword can be." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. A tearing sound resounded in the surroundings. His body tore through space. The space in front of Yi Xian collapsed inch by inch, and it was extremely shocking. An expert. The moment an expert made a move, it was obvious. Yi Xian didn't dare underestimate the black-robed man at all. He stomped his right foot, and his entire body transformed into a ray of sword light that shot out explosively. Boom! A deafening explosion resounded in the surroundings. A silhouette was sent flying out. It was none other than Yi Xian. Yi Xian instantly moved 300 m back, but he hadn't even stopped when the black-robed man appeared in front of him once more. Yi Xian stabbed with his sword. The black-robed man didn't dodge at all and just allowed Yi Xian's sword to strike his head. Bang! The sword shook violently, but the black-robed man was completely unharmed. Moreover, the black-robed man's fist smashed against Yi Xian's stomach. Bang! Yi Xian's figure was instantly blasted flying. The black-robed man clenched his right fist tightly and smashed it down towards Yi Xian from afar. Spatial break! He struck with his fist. The space around Yi Xian instantly collapsed. Bang! Yi Xian was blasted 300 m away. He just descended to the ground when the black-robed man suddenly leaped 300 m into the air. In an instant, the space in an area of 30 kilometers started to tremble violently. The black-robed man slowly closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he suddenly slapped his palm down. Bang! The heavens and the earth shook violently, and the space in an area of 30 kilometers instantly cracked into the shape of a spider web. At the same time, a powerful force descended from the sky and headed straight for Yi Xian. The force was so strong that it could destroy the heavens and the earth. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He held his sword with both hands, and in the next moment he drew his sword and slashed upwards. At the instant he drew his sword and slashed upwards, his soul suddenly left his body, and his soul slashed out as well. It was a very strange scene. Because at this moment, both Yi Xian's body and soul were attacking with their swords. Seeing this scene, Xia and the others instantly furrowed their brows. Chapter 462. Yi Xian's body and soul attacked at practically the exact same time, and it seemed like a single attack. He slashed down. A powerful sword aura instantly stopped the powerful force in midair. After a moment of silence, bang! The force instantly shattered. A ray of light shot into the sky and shot towards the black-robed man. The black-robed man clenched his right hand into a fist and punched down. Bang! The heavens and the earth trembled as the black-robed man retreated by over 100 m. Meanwhile, his eyes suddenly narrowed slightly, and he swiftly raised his arms to block the attack. A ray of light had suddenly arrived before him. Bang! The black-robed man's arms trembled, and he retreated repeatedly. However, he'd only just retreated when another ray of light slashed towards him. It was extremely fast. The black-robed man smashed his fist forward. Bang! The powerful fist aura instantly shattered the ray of light, but another ray of light arrived. It was practically a seamless connection. The black-robed man didn't even have the time to launch a second punch, and the sword slashed against his chest. Bang! The black-robed man instantly retreated 300 m away. As soon as he stopped, he suddenly raised his hands towards the sky. Defend! As soon as he finished speaking, a huge barrier of light suddenly appeared around him. Meanwhile, strands of light arrived soundlessly. Bang! 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 Countless rays of light slashed down incessantly like a storm, and it was an extremely magnificent scene. Zuoqing's face was gloomy. Xia remained silent as well. A short while later, Zuoqing spoke softly, "The speed and might of that sword. If it's a group battle, then it's extremely terrifying when he attacks from the shadows." Xia nodded slightly. Presently, Yi Xian was fighting the black-robed man in a one-on-one battle. So, Yi Xian's flying sword wasn't especially terrifying because it was a sword of light. But if it was a group battle, then Yi Xian could attack from the shadows, and very few could defeat him. Even Zuoqing was extremely fearful. He wasn't afraid if he fought Yi Xian in an open battle, but he was extremely fearful if Yi Xian played tricks from the shadows. Meanwhile, Xia spoke softly, "Are you confident in your ability to deal with him?" Zuoqing said solemnly, "I can only deal with him." Xia faintly nodded, "That's enough." Zuoqing looked at Xia. "The people from the other side can't deal with him?" Xia said softly, "Let's see if they are willing to part with their hard-earned capital." Below, Yi Xian suddenly rushed in front of the man, and those flying swords still did not break. When Yi Xian arrived in front of the black-robed man, he slashed down with his sword. Boom! The light around the black-robed man instantly shattered. Meanwhile, the black-robed man blasted his fist towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't dodge, he just stabbed out with his sword. Boom! The two of them rapidly retreated, but as Yi Xian was retreating, countless flying swords suddenly slashed at the black-robed man's body. Boom, 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 boom. The black-robed man retreated madly, and he retreated thousands of feet away. After he stopped, the black robe exploded into pieces. Underneath the black robe was a pure black armor. It was a treasure at the blessed realm. In the distance, Yi Xian took a deep breath, playing with equipment. All along, he didn't want to use soul-suppressing sword easily. It wasn't arrogance, but he hoped that he wouldn't rely too much on these external objects because soul-suppressing sword was too powerful. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page, strength that didn't belong to him. Of course, if others also used external objects, he definitely wouldn't be stupid enough not to use them. In the distance, the black-robed man stared at Yi Xian. "I underestimated your sword." Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and grinned. "Come, let's continue." As his voice fell, He directly rushed towards the black-robed man not far away with his sword. Fight. Right now, he only had this thought in his mind, to fight to his heart's content. Because he found that he kind of liked this kind of battle. Seeing Yi Xian rush over with his sword, the black-robed man's expression instantly turned sinister. He was just about to make a move, but at this moment, a sword suddenly appeared in front of him. The black-robed man's pupils constricted slightly, and he raised his hand and blasted out a punch. His punch was like a river bursting its banks, and a powerful force instantly shattered the sword light. At this moment, another sword light appeared in front of him, and he didn't have time to punch a second time. So, he crossed his arms and suddenly blocked it in front of him. Bang! Yi Xian's sword slashed on the black-robed man's arms, and the latter instantly retreated explosively. Meanwhile, another sword light slashed over. It was extremely swift, and the black-robed man didn't have time to react before the sword light slashed on his body. Bang! The sword light shattered, and the black-robed man retreated explosively once more. This time, he retreated explosively for 300 m, and he hadn't even stopped when Yi Xian appeared in front of him once more. The black-robed man suddenly pressed his hands together and shouted angrily, "Defend!" As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly condensed and formed a thick spatial barrier. Yi Xian's sword slashed directly on this spatial barrier, and the entire spatial barrier suddenly trembled. Yi Xian's arm felt numb, and when he wanted to attack again, the black-robed man had already retreated 600 m away. More than 1 kilometer away, his flying sword's speed couldn't reach its limit. Yi Xian stopped. In the distance, the black-robed man wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian while clenching his right hand tightly. Yi Xian smiled and said, "You're not fighting anymore?" The black-robed man said coldly, "You seem to be very complacent." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, "I don't want to fight a war of words with you. Just tell me, will you fight or not?" The black-robed man clenched his right hand tightly, and in the next moment he suddenly punched the ground. Bang! The ground instantly collapsed. A powerful force swept towards Yi Xian. In the distance, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. A wisp of sword light instantly shattered the force, but at this moment, the black-robed man retreated another 300 m. Seeing this, Yi Xian, who was about to make a move, shook his head, "Boring." After saying that, he turned around and left. If the other party kept dodging, he really couldn't do anything to the other party. Seeing Yi Xian turn around and leave, the black-robed man suddenly shouted angrily, "Yi Xian!" Yi Xian ignored the other party and sped up. In a short while, he and the war army disappeared into the distance. Seeing this scene, the black-robed man's face suddenly became extremely ugly. On the mountain peak, Xianxia shook his head slightly. "He's afraid of death." Zuoqing looked at the black-robed man below. "Him?" Xianxia nodded. "His strength isn't weaker than that Yi Xian. Unfortunately, he's afraid and doesn't dare to fight to the death. That's why he's at a disadvantage and is being suppressed by Yi Xian." Zuoqing said in a deep voice, "If he fights Yi Xian in close combat, how can he resist his flying sword?" Xianxia smiled and said, "There are 2 ways. First, be faster than him. Second, have an invincible body and directly resist his flying sword." Saying that, he looked at Zuoqing. "You're different. Your physique is special. If you fight him, you can fight normally." Zuoqing nodded slightly. "Understood." Xianxia said, "Let's go." Tiansha suddenly said, "Don't we care about that Yi Xian? This chapter is not finished, please continue." Xianxia smiled and said, "If we fight now, won't people say that we're taking turns to fight? Don't worry, there will be opportunities in the future." After saying that, he turned around and left. On the other side, after Yi Xian and the war army left, they directly returned to Burial Sky Great Wall. After returning to Burial Sky Great Wall, Yi Xian discovered that there were more people along the way. These people should be from Never-Ending Star Sector. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was that when these people looked at him, their gazes were quite abnormal. Yi Xian ignored these people and came to the mountain range where he often cultivated. In an open space, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and began to heal his injuries. In the battle with the black-robed man, it had to be said that it was a little thrilling at the beginning. At the beginning, he was suppressed by the other party and almost couldn't fight back. Unfortunately, the other party was afraid of his flying sword in the end and didn't dare to fight him with his life. It was also because of this that he turned the tables at the end and suppressed the other party. In this battle, most of the time, it depended on who was more ruthless and who was more reckless. 2 hours later, Yi Xian's body was almost recovered. He took out the mystic technique. In the mystic technique, there were 4 mystic techniques: divine movement, 1,000 caddies, essence return, and lightning punishment. The 4 mystic techniques represented 4 attributes: speed, strength, defense, and lightning arts. He had already experienced the man's divine movement and 1,000 caddies. As for essence return and lightning punishment, he killed the other party before he could use them. Yi Xian decided to cultivate divine movement first. He needed speed. His flying sword was all about speed, and the faster, the better. Before cultivating, Yi Xian asked, "Little soul, what do I need to pay attention to when cultivating this mystic technique?" Little soul was silent for a moment, then said, "Be careful." Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian began to cultivate. When he began to cultivate this mystic technique, Yi Xian found that it was more powerful than he had expected. For example, if he succeeded in cultivating divine movement, his speed could increase by at least several times in a short period of time. What did several times mean? Especially his flying sword, if its speed increased by several times, it would be so fast that he wouldn't even be able to sense it. At the thought of that scene, Yi Xian felt his blood boil. Cultivate. Yi Xian began to cultivate like crazy. However, because it was his first time cultivating a mystic technique, he was very careful and didn't dare to act recklessly. Moreover, he realized that just as Little Soul had said, this mystic technique did have some side effects. Once he used it, his entire body would feel as if it had been sucked dry, and he would fall into fatigue. It could be said that this mystic technique couldn't be used under normal circumstances. It was either used to fight for his life or to escape. No matter what, it was a way to save his life. At the Great Wall of Heavens, Wei Yangtian stood silently on the city wall. Behind her was the pavilion master of the 100 Dawn Pavilion, Bai Shaoxian, Mr. Bai, the Ghoul Sect Master Li Changfeng, the Hallowed Grounds Holy Lord Mu Shiran, the White Robes Sect Master Xuejing, and an old man. It could be said that all the top experts of the never-ending starfield were here. The Hallowed Grounds Holy Lord Mu Shiran glanced at Wei Yangtian and said, "Palace Master, everyone knows that the Otherworld has never been enemies with the never-ending starfield. But now, because of Yi Xian, the Otherworld has joined forces with the Moke clan." Everyone looked at Wei Yangtian. Wei Yangtian remained expressionless. "What do you think?" Mu Shiran spoke indifferently. "Palace Master, you can either obtain that precious treasure yourself and use it against the Moke clan, or hand over Yi Xian to appease the Otherworld's rage." The surroundings suddenly fell silent when they heard this. P.S. Happy May Day. I strongly suggest that you don't travel far today, or you'll collapse from the boredom. Finally, today is the 1st, so everyone has a guaranteed monthly ticket. Please support me. End of this chapter. Chapter 463. Everyone was looking at Wei Yangtian. Mu Yuran, the Holy Land's Holy Lord, looked calm. No one knew what he was thinking. Everyone's expressions were solemn. A moment later, Wei Yangtian turned to Mu Yuran. Appease the foreign region's anger? Who cares about the foreign region? Why should the never-ending starfield appease them? Mu Yuran didn't back down. He met Wei Yangtian's gaze. Palace Lord Wei Yang, this isn't just about the never-ending Star Palace. It concerns the life and death of everyone in the never-ending starfield. Why should we provoke the foreign region for Yi Xian? Of course, if you want to use that treasure against the Moke clan, the Holy Land will have no objections. Wei Yangtian stared at Mu Yuran. Suddenly, 2 black figures appeared behind Mu Yuran. Everyone's expressions changed when they saw this. Mu Yuran's expression changed as well. He hadn't expected Wei Yang Tian to attack him. Bai Xiaoxian suddenly laughed. Palace Lord, we're all from the never-ending starfield. We're all doing this for the never-ending starfield. Wei Yang Tian waved his right hand lightly, and the two black figures behind Mu Yuran disappeared. Wei Yang Tian glanced at Mu Yuran coldly, then turned to look at the horizon. I know you're all wondering why I'm protecting him. It's easy to kill him and steal his treasure, but what about after? Such a treasure shouldn't have appeared in the never-ending starfield, but it did, and in the hands of such a weak person. Have you ever wondered why? Everyone fell silent. Wei Yang Tian continued, taking this treasure means accepting the karma that comes with it. Li Changfeng suddenly said, Palace Lord, I have no objections if you don't want to take the treasure by force. However, if it falls into the hands of the foreign region or the Mok clan. The old farmer beside Li Changfeng nodded slightly. Sect Master Li is right. If such a treasure falls into the hands of the Mok clan, it'll be a disaster for the never-ending starfield. Wei Yang Tian turned to look at the crowd. Do you wish for me to control that supreme treasure? Li Changfeng nodded. That's the safest way. Wei Yang Tendo said, the treasure should have already recognized him as its master. Li Zhangfeng was silent. Mu leisurely said, so what? Treasures of heaven and earth belong to those who are capable. Wei Yang Tian glanced at Mu Yuran, then at Bai Xiaoxian. Investigate and see if he has come into contact with the Mok clan or the Outlanders. Hearing this, Mu Yuran's face changed. Palace Master Wei Yang, what do you mean? Unending Sky remained silent. Bai Xiaoxian tilted her head and whispered something. In the dark, someone retreated. Mu Yuran stared at Wei Yang Tian. Palace Master, what do you mean by this? Could it be that Palace Master is trying to frame my holy land for an unknown ant? Unending Sky remained silent. Mu Yuran's face turned ugly. He looked at the people around him, but they didn't say anything. They hoped that Wei Yang Tian would obtain that precious treasure and use it to deal with the Mok clan. However, Mu Yuran was obviously different. He was too impatient. Moreover, he had the intention to deliberately intensify the conflict and sow discord. Mu Yuran's expression instantly became slightly unsightly when he saw everyone remain silent, but he didn't dare move. If he moved now, he would definitely die. Never ever doubt this woman's strength. About 15 minutes later, a black figure suddenly appeared behind Bai Xiaoxian. Bai Xiaoxian's brows slowly furrowed. She looked at Unending Sky. Someone came into contact with him. However, I don't know if it's the Mok clan or the other. Someone from the domain. Unending Sky looked at Mu Yuran. The latter said in a low voice, it's the other domain. Hearing this, everyone looked at Mu Yuran. Mu Yuran was expressionless. They came into contact with me and said that they don't want to be enemies with the never-ending starfield. As long as we hand over Yi Xian, they will leave immediately. They can even help us fight against the Mok clan. As he spoke, he glanced at the crowd. Everyone, I feel that we really don't need to make the entire other domain our enemy for the sake of one Yi Xian. At this moment, Unending Sky suddenly said softly, all this time, I felt that the never-ending starfield is inferior to the Mok clan in terms of unity. They are a clan, but we are a group. As she spoke, she looked at Mu Yuran. The latter's expression changed. At this moment, he already knew that Unending Sky had the intention to kill him. At this moment, he was secretly on guard, ready to fight to the death at any moment. At this moment, Daoist Qing Nong suddenly said, Palace Lord, the first Holy Lord died in battle. Countless sacred land geniuses have also sacrificed their lives for the never-ending starfield. Hearing this, Unending Sky was silent for a moment. Then she turned and said, Mu Shiran, you are their disgrace. From this moment on, you are not allowed to take even half a step out of the sacred land. Let someone else be the master of the sacred land. Mu Shiran still wanted to say something, but Daoist Qing Nong suddenly said, go back. Mu Shiran glanced at Unending Sky and the others, then turned and left. Beside Unending Sky, Bai Xiaoxian suddenly said, I'm afraid this person already has the intention to rebel. Beside her, Daoist Qing Nong said, everyone has their own ambitions. Bai Shaoxian shook her head. It's not just about him. Taoist Qing Nong smiled bitterly. Miss Xian, the sacred land also has countless seniors who died in battle for the never-ending starfield. It's best not to be too ruthless. Bai Shaoxian smiled and said, I respect those who sacrifice themselves in the sacred land, but it's precisely because of this that we should protect this starfield well. Mu Yuran is too selfish, especially at this critical juncture. He's still calculating his own little schemes. He really deserves to be killed. Daoist Qing Nong looked at Wei Yangtian, who was nearby. Wei Yangtian said softly, We've been at ease for a little too long. We've almost forgotten about the Mok clan. With that, she turned and left. On the spot, Bai Shaoxian looked at Taoist Qing Nong. It's not that we're targeting the Holy Lord of the sacred land. It's just that he will definitely cause trouble, and it's extremely likely that he will cause trouble at a critical juncture for us. With that, she turned and left. Taoist Qing Nong smiled bitterly and looked at Li Zhangfeng. Actually, the old man has a little doubt as well. Why does the palace lord keep protecting that youth? Li Zhangfeng said, This person isn't simple. Besides, I feel that if we listen to Mu Yuran's words and kill this person to seize his treasure, I'm afraid we'll really attract trouble. As he spoke, he looked at Taoist Qing Nong. As Miss Yen said, I'm afraid the Holy Lord will not be willing to be trapped in the sacred land. Taoist Qing Nong shook his head. If he's willing to be trapped, he might be able to live. If he's unwilling, there's nothing the old man can do. Li Zhangfeng nodded. Let's go. With that, the two turned and left. In the mountain range, Yi Xian was still quietly cultivating the mystic technique. Currently, he could already cast the stride technique with some difficulty. It had to be said that with the enhancement of the mystic technique, his speed had increased to a terrifying degree. He was so fast that he could not control it. It was too fast. After using the mystic technique on the flying sword's speed increased by at least several times. However, the Qi sword could not withstand this speed at all. Only the soul-suppressing sword could. Besides that, there was another serious problem. If he used it on the flying sword, he could only use the flying sword once at most because it consumed too much energy. Not only did it consume a lot of his soul, but it also consumed a lot of his physical body. Because it was too fast, he had to wear the god set. Otherwise, his physical body would be torn to pieces by this speed. This was the first time he felt that being fast was not a good thing. After mastering the swift, he decided to start cultivating 15 kilograms. 15 kilograms. He still remembered the scene of the man sending him flying with a punch. It was so strong that it was unreasonable. If he used it on the drawing the sword to fight the heavens, it would undoubtedly be very terrifying. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Little soul, how can I avoid the backlash of these mystic techniques? Is there such a way? He suddenly remembered that if he did not suffer from the backlash, these mystic techniques would be a little terrifying. Little soul was silent for a moment and then said, Yes. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, Hurry up and say it. Little soul said, Young master's physical body is strong enough to resist the backlash of these mystic techniques. This is the only way. Or, young master has a special physique and is born with a strong resistance. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Looks like the only way is to strengthen the physical body. Little soul suddenly said, If young master wants to strengthen the physical body, I have a way. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, What way? Little soul said, Absorb souls and use them to strengthen the physical body and form a unique soul shield. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, Is that possible? Little soul said, Yes, young master can absorb souls and use their energy to temper the body. The effect is very good. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, Okay, I'll try. With that, he took out the soul-suppressing sword and started to absorb. In next to no time, countless strands of soul energy started to converge towards him, and then they were quickly absorbed by his body. At this time, Little Soul said, Young master needs to maintain a clear state of mind and not be affected by the consciousness of the soul. Yi Xian nodded. He was a swordsman, so he could do this. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. Night fell. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, his body was like a black vortex. Countless strands of soul energy were still constantly converging towards his body, and at this moment, his body was gradually changing. 2 hours later, Yi Xian suddenly stood up. He gently pressed his hands to both sides, and in an instant, the space on both sides shook violently. Yi Xian took a deep breath. At this moment, he felt his body was full of strength. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Little soul, I absorbed so many souls, did it affect you?" Little soul said, "No." Yi Xian was puzzled, "Why?" Little soul was silent for a moment, and then said, "Because I absorbed them without wanting them." The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Damn, he kind of wanted to hit someone. At this moment, suddenly, the space around Yi Xian suddenly condensed into a huge cage that locked Yi Xian. A moment later, a light formation appeared in front of Yi Xian, and in an instant, Yi Xian disappeared. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the great wall of heaven. "Impudent!" It was Endless Sky's voice. Chapter 464. A beam of white light suddenly shot up from the great wall of burial sky. The next moment, the beam of white light tore through space and entered the spatial black hole. As never-ending sky disappeared, Mr. Bai and Ague showed up where Yi Xian had been. Mr. Bai's face darkened when he saw Yi Xian disappear. "The other world?" Ague asked. Mr. Bai nodded. "Let's go." He pulled with both hands and the space in front of him tore apart. The next moment, the two of them disappeared. On the city wall, Dugu Xian hurriedly found Bai Xiaoxian. Bai Xiaoxian said softly, "Don't worry. The palace lord and Mr. Bai are already in pursuit." Dugu Xian's face was pale. "The other world?" Bai Xiaoxian nodded. Dugu Xian clenched her right hand. Her expression was as cold as water. No one knew what she was thinking. Bai Xiaoxian looked at Dugu Xian. "I've always been curious." Dugu Xian said softly, "What are you curious about?" Bai Xiaoxian looked at Dugu Xian. "I've investigated. All the information on Yi Xian can only be found when he was half a year old. Before that, there was only one name on his father. No, only one word, young. Am I right?" Bai Xiaoxian was silent. Dugu Xian smiled and said, "And the people of the Yi clan actually know nothing about him. If I'm not wrong, he might not be a member of the Yi clan. He's just hiding from something, or for some reason, the two of you placed him and his sister in the Yi clan. After all, the Yi clan has so many people and so many branches. It's easy to create the identity of an illegitimate child, right?" Dugu Xian said softly, "I'm afraid nothing in the never-ending starfield can be hidden from you, Miss Xian." Bai Xiaoxian shook her head. "There are many things I don't know. Take Yi Xian's father for example. Even though I used some special powers, I couldn't find out anything about him. And this Yang character of his was obtained from you." Dugu Xian looked at Bai Xiaoxian. Bai Xiaoxian said with a smile, "When you were captured by the Dugu family, you said one word. That was it." Bai Xiaoxian was silent. Dugu Xian said softly, "His father should not be an ordinary person, right?" Dugu Xian shook her head. "When I first met him, he was just an ordinary person." Bai Xiaoxian said softly, "Understood. You don't know his background either." Dugu Xian turned to look at the spatial crack in the sky and said softly, "I just want him to be safe now." Bai Xiaoxian said, "Don't worry, the other side forcefully kidnapped people in front of Palace Master this time. They will definitely suffer Palace Master's wrath." Dugu Xian looked at the crack in the sky without saying anything. Bai Xiaoxian also looked towards the crack in space. She frowned slightly. After so many years, have the people forgotten how terrifying Palace Master is? At this moment, Yi Xian found himself in a space cage. This space cage was shuttling through space at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian was about to break it by force when Soul suddenly said, "Young master, don't move. You are currently shuttling through space at a high speed. This speed is not something you can bear. If you break it by force, you will be the first to die." Yi Xian's face sank. "So, I can't do anything now?" Soul hesitated for a moment and said, Young master, why don't you cry? You will feel better if you cry. Yi Xian's face twitched. This soul, at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly noticed that a space door had appeared in front of him. At the same time, he felt a powerful force attacking him from behind. The people from the Great Wall of Heaven. Yi Xian was delighted. At this moment, the space cage that imprisoned him instantly sped up. In an instant, he flew directly into the door of light, and the door instantly closed. At this moment, Wei Yangtian rushed over. Just as the door was about to disappear, Wei Yangtian stretched out his right hand and grabbed. Boom! The door that was about to disappear was directly grabbed by Wei Yangtian. In the next moment, she pulled to both sides, and the closed door was pulled open by her. Then she disappeared on the spot. At this moment, Mr. Bai and Ague arrived. The two looked at each other, and Mr. Bai said softly, "She is angry." Ague nodded slightly. Kidnapping people in front of her. Has the foreign land gone mad? Mr. Bai shook his head. I'm afraid it's not that simple. At this point, he seemed to think of something and his face changed. Not good. This may be a trap. Their target is most likely not Yi Xian, but Palace Master. As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared on the spot. At the same time, his voice came from afar. I will go to the foreign land. You go back and open the formation. On the spot, Ague turned and disappeared. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian felt himself coming to a stop. He glanced at his surroundings. He was now on an altar, surrounded by 4 towering pillars. On the pillars, some unknown beasts were drawn. These beasts had ferocious faces and were glaring ferociously, as though they were about to devour anyone they saw. There was not a single person around him. Yi Xian frowned slightly. What was going on? At this moment he suddenly turned around. The space in front of him suddenly trembled violently. Soon, the space split open, and a woman walked out. Seeing the woman, Yi Xian was stunned. He pointed at the woman and said in shock, "You?" The woman walked up to Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian coldly, and then looked around. After a while, a cold smile appeared on her lips. So your target is not him, but me. At this moment, an illusory old man suddenly appeared on one of the giant pillars. The old man looked down at endless sky. Palace Master Endless, the foreign land does not want to be enemies with the never-ending star region. As long as the Palace Master hands Yi Xian to us, we will leave immediately and never step into the never-ending star region again. Endless Sky looked at the old man coldly. If not for the Moke clan's support, would the foreign land dare to lure me here? As she spoke, she looked around. Since when did the Moke clan become cowards? At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the air. The middle-aged man smiled. Palace Master Endless, long time no see. Endless Sky's expression was cold. "Mou, so many years have passed. Do you still only know how to play tricks like this?" The middle-aged man named Mou smiled. Palace Master Endless, intelligence is also a form of strength, isn't it? Endless Sky nodded. Then let me see your so-called strength. With that, she stomped her right foot. Boom! The entire altar shook violently. Behind her, Yi Xian felt dizzy, and his head almost exploded. However, there was nothing wrong with the altar at all. Endless Heaven's beautiful brows knit together slightly when she witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, Mou suddenly smiled and said, "Palace Master Endless, we're all aware of your strength. So, how could we possibly prepare a one for you?" Palace Master Endless? At this moment, Endless Sky suddenly said, "You talk too much." With that, she punched at Mou from afar. Boom! The space around Mou instantly shattered. At the same time, Mou instantly retreated thousands of feet away. Just as Endless Sky was about to attack again, the old man on the pillar suddenly stomped his right foot. Activate the array. With that, the entire pillar shook violently. Immediately after, a light screen suddenly appeared, trapping Yi Xian and Endless Sky on the altar. Wei Yangtian raised his right hand and waved it gently. A powerful force swept out from his palm. This force was like a tidal wave that directly shook the light screen. Rumble! The entire altar started trembling violently. At the same time, the barrier of light exploded into pieces. However, right at this moment, the 4 pillars shook abruptly, and then the demon beasts inscribed on them suddenly came to life. In the next moment, those demon beasts pounced down towards midnight heaven, and for a time, all of them danced about wildly. Meanwhile, Yixian clearly felt the sky darken. Meanwhile, Endless Sky suddenly said, "Retreat! Retreat!" Yixian hurriedly laughed bitterly. "There's no place to retreat." Endless Sky frowned slightly. In the next moment, she appeared in front of Yixian. In the blink of an eye, she spread her right hand forward and slammed it upwards. Bang! At this moment, Yixian felt like the heavens and the earth were on the verge of collapsing. As soon as Endless Sky slammed her palm forward, shrill cries resounded in the sky. Especially the demon beasts at the front, they were instantly transformed into ashes, and the other demon beasts collapsed to the ground. However, the demon beasts on the 4 pillars seemed endless. All sorts of demon beasts kept appearing and pouncing towards Endless Sky. Endless Sky frowned slightly when she saw this, and then she stomped her right foot lightly. Bang! The entire altar shook violently, and then countless cracks appeared on it. However, Yixian spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Endless Sky's frown deepened, and she held back a little. Meanwhile, Yu suddenly laughed. "Looks like you really care about him, Palace Master. You actually held back your strength. However, you might not know that the experts of my Moke clan are already on their way to the Great Wall of Heaven's Burial. The longer you stay here, the more people from the Great Wall of Heaven's Burial will die. Whether you protect the Great Wall of Heaven's Burial, Never-Ending Starfield, or Yixian, it's up to you." Endless Sky said softly, "So your target is the Great Wall of Heaven." Yu smiled. "Of course. With you guarding the Great Wall of Heaven's Burial, the Moke clan will have to pay a huge price to take it down. Therefore, this is the only way to lure you here. Once the Great Wall of Heaven's Burial is breached, the Moke clan's army will be able to march straight into Never-Ending Starfield." Endless Sky nodded slightly. "That's a good idea." Yu narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Palace Master, whether you want to protect the Great Wall of Heaven's Burial or Yixian, it's up to you." Endless Sky slowly closed her eyes, and her right hand clenched tightly. No one knew what she was thinking. Behind her, Yixian also fell silent. Outside, Mo's lips curled into an inexplicable smile. Everything was under control. The entire place fell silent. P.S. Happy May Day, everyone. Chapter 465. On the altar, the demonic beasts stopped as well, staring at Wei Yangtian and Yixian greedily, ready to attack at any moment. Wei Yangtian stood at the center of the altar, his eyes closed, his thoughts unknown. And Yixian was behind Wei Yangtian. After a while, Mou frowned when he saw that Endless Sky remained silent and didn't take any action. He stared at Endless Sky in the center of the altar. After a long time, he seemed to have thought of something, and his face changed. You're a clone." "Clone?" Wei Yangtian opened his eyes and looked at Mou, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "Seems like you're not that stupid after all." Hearing his words, Mou's face turned ugly, while Wei Yangtian's lips curled up. "Didn't you want to drag it out? Come, I'll accompany you." Mou glared at him coldly before turning to leave. At this time, the old man on the pillar suddenly spoke up anxiously. "Brother Mou." Mou stopped, replying softly, "My apologies, I did not expect this." The old man's face darkened. "Are you going to leave just like that?" Mou laughed. "Of course not. Since my Moke clan has agreed to ally with the other side, we will not abandon our ally." As his voice rang out, a group of black-clothed men appeared around the pillar. There were about 20 of them, each of them wielding a black longbow, their arrows knocked. Mou spoke. "Brother Guyu, she's just a clone. Your side should be able to deal with her. Furthermore, Yixian is on the altar. If you want my Moke clan to act, that's fine. However, my Moke clan wants half of Yixian's treasures." Guyu's face changed as he looked at Mou, smiling. "Brother Mo is right, she's just a clone, my Moke clan can deal with her. There's no need to trouble you." Mou nodded. I'm going to the Great Wall of Burial Heavens. Take care, Brother Gu. Gu Yu quickly replied, take care. Mou didn't say anything else and disappeared into the distance. After Mou disappeared, the black-clothed archers around the pillar also retreated. On the long pillar, the old man looked down at endless sky. Endless Palace Lord, I'll say it one last time. As long as you hand over Yixian, the foreign region will retreat immediately. We will never become enemies with Endless Star Region. Wei Yangtian coldly glanced at the old man, then looked at Yixian. Her right hand grabbed at Yixian from afar. With this grab, the space around Yixian began to condense. In the end, this space formed a barrier that protected Yixian. Seeing this, the expression of the old man on the pillar changed. At this time, Wei Yangtian suddenly disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was already in front of a long pillar. Then, she slammed her palm on the pillar. Boom! The long pillar immediately shattered. For a time, the entire altar started to tremble violently. At the same time, countless demon beasts on the altar fell to the ground, and shrill cries resounded incessantly. Suddenly, a black shadow flew out from within Yixian's body. Emperor Hound. After the Emperor Hound emerged, it started to devour the demon beasts on the ground madly. Yixian. Meanwhile, Wei Yangtian had already appeared in front of a few other long pillars. It didn't take long for the pillars to shatter one after another, and countless demon beasts died miserably. As for the demon beasts, they couldn't get close to Wei Yangtian at all. Especially now, when Wei Yangtian attacked without any hesitation. The old man in the sky finally started to panic when he saw this scene. He hadn't expected Wei Yangtian's clone to be so terrifying. This was just a clone. It didn't take long for the entire altar to shatter. However, the old man didn't hesitate to turn around and flee. In the sky, Wei Yangtian stared coldly at the old man in the sky. Flee? I'm afraid you're dreaming. As soon as she finished speaking, she grabbed forward with her right hand and squeezed lightly. The old man's body shattered into pieces in the distant sky. Wei Yangtian lowered her head to look at Yixian. Yixian spoke softly, Are you Wei Yang? Wei Yangtian glanced coldly at Yixian. Go back. As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her right hand lightly, and the space in front of Yixian split apart. Yixian was just about to enter when the Emperor Hound suddenly said, Wait. Wait until I'm full. The corners of Yixian's mouth twitched when he heard this. Actually, he hadn't expected the Emperor Hound to suddenly awaken. After all, it had been in deep sleep until now. But that's fine. Having the Emperor Hound here is equivalent to having an extraordinary helper. Wei Yangtian paid no further attention to Yixian and the Emperor Hound, and she just turned around and chased after them. Yixian hesitated for a moment, but he didn't choose to follow her in the end. It would be utterly useless if he went over now, and he would only be a burden to her. As for the questions in his heart, he didn't choose to ask them now. However, if he wasn't wrong, then the Emperor Hound was probably the little girl he'd met in the sky world. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound had finished devouring all the demon beast corpses that covered the ground. The Emperor Hound patted its stomach, and then it walked over to Yixian. It glanced at Yixian, and then it burped. Yixian was speechless. The Emperor Hound sized up Yixian. Kid, you've become much stronger. Yixian smiled. Let's go back first. The Emperor Hound suddenly said, Why? Yixian asked, Why don't you go back? The Emperor Hound glanced at the surroundings, and then it said, I sense the aura of many demon beasts here. How about it? Are you interested in getting some? Yixian spoke in a low voice. Brother Emperor Hound, are you sure? The Emperor Hound nodded. Very sure. Yixian grinned. That's exactly what I was thinking. Being captured by the Outlander territory was undoubtedly extremely aggrieving for him, and he was truly unwilling to return just like that. Let's do it. The Emperor Hound returned to the pagoda while Yixian concealed his aura with chaotic energy. It didn't take long for him to vanish on the spot. He naturally wouldn't fight the Outlander territory head-on. Moreover, with his chaotic energy concealment ability, unless it was a top-rate expert, Otherwise, no one would be able to discover him. Moreover, Wei Yangtian had clearly gone to look for trouble with the Outlander Territories experts, so this was the best time for him. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to chase after Wei Yangtian. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive before an ancient city. Explosions resounded from time to time in the sky above the ancient city, and even the heavens and the earth trembled. Sensing this scene, the corners of Yi Xian's eyes twitched. Needless to say, Wei Yangtian was definitely fighting with the Outlander Territories experts. Yi Xian didn't care that much and directly snuck into the city. It didn't take long for him to arrive before the largest palace in the city, and above the palace were 3 black bags, Deviant Soul's Palace. Yi Xian quietly snuck in, and he didn't sense any powerful aura in the palace. Clearly, the Outlander Territories experts had been pinned down by Wei Yangtian. Yi Xian hurriedly snuck into the palace and began to frantically loot. About a quarter of an hour later, Yi Xian left the palace, and just as he was about to leave, the Emperor Hound suddenly said, "Go to the right." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" The Emperor Hound said, "There are demonic beasts over there." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then snuck to the right. He knew that the Emperor Hound could devour these demonic beasts. It should be able to recover from its injuries, but the Emperor Hound's injuries shouldn't be completely healed. Soon, Yi Xian arrived before an altar, which was exactly the same as the altar he had been trapped on before, and these long pillars were painted with the shapes of countless monsters. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Brother Emperor Hound, they haven't been released yet." The Emperor Hound said, "Stupid, can't I go in?" As soon as it finished speaking, a black light flew out from Yi Xian's chest, and this black light instantly sank into one of the long pillars, and soon, the long pillar began to shake violently. Yi Xian turned to look at the distant horizon, and now he only hoped that Wei Yangtian would be able to cause more trouble, or the Outlander Territories experts would most likely discover this place, and then he and the Emperor Hound wouldn't be able to escape. At this moment, the Emperor Hound ran out, and Yi Xian's body had become slightly larger. Yi Xian was just about to speak, but the Emperor Hound had directly charged into another long pillar. Yi Xian's face darkened. This fellow is addicted to eating. At this moment, the distant horizon suddenly shook violently, and Yi Xian hurriedly turned to look at the horizon. In the sky, Wei Yangtian held a bloody head in her right hand, and not far from her stood a gray-clothed old man, and 4 enormous black dragons floated around the old man. The old man looked at Wei Yangtian, and besides iciness, there was also a trace of fear in his eyes. The old man stared fixedly at Wei Yangtian. "Palace Mistress Wei Yang, our target is only the Yi Xian. Why do you have to do this for him?" Wei Yangtian suddenly raised her hand and waved, and the old man's expression changed, and he swiftly formed a seal with both hands. In an instant, the 4 enormous black dragons around him roared. Boom, boom, boom. The surrounding space trembled, and it seemed like it was about to collapse. It was extremely shocking. A moment later, the sky returned to normal, and the gray-clothed old man had already retreated thousands of feet. The gray-clothed old man stared at Wei Yangtian. "Palace Mistress Wei Yang, the Moke clan's powerhouses are already attacking the Great Wall of Burial Skies. If you don't go back, your main body's strength will not be at its peak. Are you really going to fight to the death with the old man here?" Wei Yangtian slowly clenched her right hand, but said nothing. The gray-clothed old man continued, "Palace Mistress Wei Yang, if your main body was here, the old man would indeed not be your match. However, you're just a clone, so I'm afraid it won't be that easy to kill the old man. As for the Great Wall of Burial Skies, if your never-ending Starfield painters don't take action, who can stop the Moke clan's powerhouse?" Wei Yangtian suddenly waved her right hand, and the distant space trembled. The gray-clothed old man retreated rapidly, and this time, he retreated thousands of feet. Wei Yangtian did not choose to continue attacking. She turned and disappeared into the distant horizon. As Wei Yangtian left, she looked coldly to the right. After she completely disappeared, a light laugh suddenly rang out not far to the right. "Impressive." As the voice fell, the space suddenly split open, and a man covered in black flames walked out. The gray-clothed old man walked in front of the flaming man and said softly, "Is this the palace Mistress Wei Yang?" The gray-clothed old man nodded, "Yes." The flaming man said softly, "Indeed very strong." The gray-clothed old man said, "When will you attack?" The flaming man shook his head, "We've already informed the Void Spirit Star Palace. We're just waiting for their reply." As he spoke, he turned to look at the distant horizon. Our people should have already reached the Void Spirit Star Palace. In the distant starry sky, in a Star Palace hall, the Void Spirit Star Palace master stared at the black-clothed man in front of him. "Yi Xian? Are you sure?" The black-clothed man nodded, "Yes. He has that treasure on him." The Void Spirit Star Palace master leaned back in his chair, and after a moment he said softly, "Don't joke around. I still want to live for a few more years." Chapter 466. The black-robed man frowned. "What is the meaning of this, Palace Master Lin Su?" Lin Su shook his head. "Nothing. Go back." The black-robed man said solemnly, "Palace Master Lin Su doesn't want the treasure?" Lin Su smiled and said, "Of course I want that kind of treasure, but..." He waved his hand, "You may leave." The black-robed man wanted to say something, but Lin Su frowned. "You don't understand?" The black-robed man didn't dare to say anything else and left. After the black-robed man left, a man walked in. It was Lin Songyun, who had been to the firmament world. Lin Su shook his head. "Why did those fellows provoke Yi Xian?" Lin Songyun was taken aback, and then he said, "Palace Lord, has the matter of Yi Xian possessing the treasure been completely exposed?" Lin Su nodded. "Almost all the surrounding starfields know." Lin Songyun's face sank. "He's in big trouble." Lin Su shook his head. "It's not just big, it's very big." Lin Songyun looked at Lin Su. "What do you plan to do, Palace Master?" Lin Su smiled. "What plan? Just don't get involved." Lin Songyun fell silent. Lin Su smiled. "You're thinking why we don't help?" Lin Songyun nodded. Lin Su said softly, "I, Fongxin, have also thought so. However, do you know who are the people and forces that are coveting his treasures this time?" Lin Su said, "Don't tell me they're involved as well?" Lin Su smiled. "All the powerful forces you know are involved. Now we're the only ones left." Lin Songyun smiled bitterly. "That fellow is really unlucky." Lin Su nodded, then he stood up and walked to the entrance of the hall. "That's senior." Lin Songyun suddenly said, "Uncle, I have an idea." Lin Su said, "Speak." Lin Songyun said, "That senior's strength is beyond our imagination. It's very likely that she's from a Class 1 civilized starfield, or even a special civilized starfield. Since she cares about Yi Xian, she won't let him die." Lin Su frowned. "Are you saying that she's training Yi Xian on purpose?" Lin Songyun nodded his head. "It's highly possible that's the case, and it's very likely that she's hiding in the shadows. At this time, if we lend a hand to that Yi Xian, we'll definitely be able to make her owe us a favor. Even if she doesn't owe us a favor, a friendship will do." "A favor? Friendship?" Lin Su suddenly clenched his right hand. The woman in the plain dress was so strong that it was unreasonable. If he could make her owe Spirit Void Star Palace a favor, it would undoubtedly be a great help to Spirit Void Star Palace. As Lin Songyun had said, even if there was no favor, a friendship would do. Thinking of this, Lin Su was a little tempted. But soon he frowned. "No, if we interfere, we will also be involved." Lin Songyun smiled and said, "Uncle, we don't have to help them openly, but we can help them secretly, right?" Lin Su was silent. Lin Songyun said, "Why not give it a try?" Lin Su smiled and said, "Then you can lead them there." Lin Songyun said in a low voice, "How many?" Lin Su said softly, "There's no point in bringing too many. The important thing is to bring the strong." Lin Songyun hurriedly said, "Bring the 12 celestial spirits?" Lin Su nodded slightly. "Let them go. They have never appeared before the eyes of the world. Even if they are discovered, they will be fine. As for you, you need to change your appearance." Lin Songyun nodded and was about to leave when Lin Su suddenly said, "You can regret it now." Lin Songyun looked at Lin Su and smiled. "I want to give it a try." Lin Su looked straight at Lin Songyun. "You know, if you are exposed, I will not protect you." Lin Songyun smiled and said, "I know, but I still want to give it a try, for myself and for Spirit Void Star Palace." Hearing this, Lin Su's heart softened and he said in a low voice, "Go." Lin Songyun turned and left. After Lin Songyun left, Lin Su suddenly said, "The two of you follow him. If necessary, help him." Secretly, the two left. Lin Su looked at the distant horizon and said softly, "Why must you go and torment that brat? Isn't it better to be alive?" Foreign domain. After Wei Yangtian left, Yi Xian hurriedly called the Emperor Hound out, and then he dragged the Emperor Hound and ran. He could already sense that Wei Yangtian had left. If he continued to torment him, then it would be pure stupidity. Although the Emperor Hound did not want to leave, Yi Xian did not allow it to do as it wished and forcefully dragged it away. However, he tragically discovered one thing. The door that endless heaven had torn open for him previously had disappeared. Disappeared? How do I go back? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was Wei Yangtian. Wei Yangtian glanced at Yi Xian. "You haven't left yet?" Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. Wait for you to come with me." Wei Yangtian looked coldly at Yi Xian. "Nonsense." With that, she waved her right hand and the space in front of her split open. In the next moment, she carried Yi Xian into the spatial crack. Soon, Yi Xian, the Emperor Hound, and Wei Yangtian began to travel through space. Yi Xian hesitated, then asked, "Wei Yang?" Wei Yangtian was expressionless. Yi Xian said, "The one I met in Azure Firmament World was you, right?" Wei Yangtian did not speak. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Wei Yangtian suddenly said, "That treasure has recognized you as its owner?" Yi Xian nodded. Wei Yangtian looked at Yi Xian. "Do you know how many people are eyeing it now?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I know." Saying this, he shook his head. "Wei Yang, to be honest, I don't really want this thing." This treasure had brought him many benefits, but at the same time, it had brought him many disadvantages. If it were not for the plain-dressed woman suppressing this tower from the start, he would have been long dead. And now, the 5th floor was not a pushover. He did not know if he would explode on the spot one day. Wei Yangtian looked at Yi Xian. "Why?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "This treasure is both a blessing and a curse, a great curse. If those people knew how dangerous this thing is, they would not come for it even if you beat them to death." From the beginning until now, the 2nd floor's god, the 3rd floor's Jian Zizai. These man and beast did not kill him at the start because of the plain-dressed woman, especially the 2nd floor's god. This guy really wanted to kill him from the start. Apart from that, the tower had also trembled a few times. If it were not for the sword at the top of the tower, he would have been long dead. In short, he had survived until now because someone was protecting him and he was lucky. Although this was very hurtful, it was the truth. Wei Yangtian said softly, "This tower of yours does not belong to this world." Yi Xian nodded. "It's not from our never-ending starfield. However, I do not know where it came from." Wei Yangtian glanced at Yi Xian, then at the Emperor Hound. "You are a monster from that endless purgatory?" The Emperor Hound glanced at Wei Yangtian and nodded slightly. It still respected Unending Sky, because Unending Sky was very strong, and it couldn't beat him right now. Wei Yangtendo said, "I went to that endless purgatory years ago. In the deepest part of it, there lived a powerful soul." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "You have seen him?" Yi Xian nodded. He knew that Wei Yangtian was probably talking about the Netherworld King. Wei Yangtian wanted to say something else, but at this time, she suddenly looked up. Not far away from them, a middle-aged man had appeared out of nowhere. However, this middle-aged man was illusory, not his real body. The middle-aged man smiled. "Palace Master Wei Yang, it's been a long time." Wei Yangtian said indifferently, "Emotian Xing, are you going to stop me here?" Emotion Xing smiled. Yes, please enlighten me, Palace Master. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and a pitch-black mirror appeared in his hand. He formed a seal with his left hand and silently chanted an incantation. At this moment, Wei Yangtian, who stood by Yi Xian's side, suddenly slapped her palm on Yi Xian's shoulder, and Yi Xian flew directly into the distance. Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment, Wei Yangtian's voice resounded in his mind. Return to the Great Wall of Heavens immediately. In the spatial rift, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then turned around and teleported into the distance. Teleporting was still a little taxing for him, but fortunately, he had the Space Dao Law, so he could just barely do it. Yi Xian sped up, and soon, a series of explosions came from behind him. Suddenly, the Emperor Hound said, "Get on." Yi Xian leaped onto the Emperor Hound's back, and then it charged forward at an extremely swift speed. The Emperor Hound said, "Kid, they seem to be trying to stop her clone from returning." Yi Xian nodded. Her clone is here, so her main body strength is probably unable to reach its peak. That's probably their objective. His face fell when he spoke up to this point. I'm their objective on the surface, but they're actually trying to keep her busy. I can be said to have dragged her down this time. The Emperor Hound asked, "How do you know her?" Yi Xian replied, "I met her in the mortal world." The Emperor Hound fell silent for a short moment, and then it said, "I noticed that while you're as weak as a chicken, why are all the people you know so strong? Kid, were you a great expert in your previous life? Is that why you're so blessed in this lifetime?" Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Soul suddenly said, "Actually, the young mistress has many good points." Yi Xian hurriedly said, Don't say it, I don't want to hear it." Soul was puzzled. "Why not? I feel that although the young mistress is very weak, she's really good to her family and friends. It's just that her skin is too thick, so thick that I don't even know how to describe it." Yi Xian was speechless. "Ha!" The Emperor Hound suddenly burst into laughter. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment, the Emperor Hound suddenly stopped. Not far in front of them stood a middle-aged man in a white robe. This person was the Holy Lord. The Holy Lord looked coldly at Yi Xian, and he was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Kill him." P.S. Sorry, I'm 10 minutes late today. Because there was an error in yesterday's article, I check it twice every time I update it. If there's an error, please post it in the circle, or contact me, I'll correct it in time. Chapter 467. As soon as Yi Xian's voice resounded, the Emperor Hound charged at the Hallowed Lord. Yi Xian held tightly onto the sword at his waist while he stood on the back of the Emperor Hound, and he was accumulating strength while waiting to attack. The Hallowed Lord's gaze gradually turned icy cold when he saw the Emperor Hound and Yi Xian charging at him. In next to no time, he raised his right hand slightly. In an instant, the space before him rippled like waves. At the same time, strands of powerful spatial energy surged incessantly towards the Emperor Hound and Yi Xian. The Emperor Hound and Yi Xian were getting closer and closer. In next to no time, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up, drew his sword, and slashed. The Emperor Hound was charging at the front, and this collision caused the space in front of it and Yi Xian to shatter. Yi Xian had successfully arrived in front of the Hallowed Lord, and he swiftly drew his sword. The howl of a sword shook the sky. The Hallowed Lord gazed coldly at Yi Xian. He clenched his right hand slowly, and then he smashed his fist forward. At the instant that his fist shot forward, a strand of sword light silently arrived before him. This strand of sword light had appeared without a sound. The Hallowed Lord's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene, and he changed the direction of his fist to block above his head. Bang! The sword light slashed directly against the Hallowed Lord's fist, and the Hallowed Lord was pushed back a few meters. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound had smashed directly into the Hallowed Lord, and the Hallowed Lord swiftly raised his hands to block. Bang! The Hallowed Lord was blasted 300 m away by the Emperor Hound's attack. As soon as the Hallowed Lord's figure stopped, Yi Xian had appeared in front of him, and then a strand of sword light slashed down towards the Hallowed Lord's face. The Hallowed Lord's expression suddenly became ferocious. In the next moment, he clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it upwards. His fist was like an erupting volcano, and a powerful force forcefully shattered Yi Xian's sword light. However, a strand of flying sword had soundlessly slashed down towards the hallowed lord's head. A flying sword? The strand of sword light slashed down from the hallowed lord's head. However, the hallowed lord's body didn't split into two like Yi Xian had. Instead, his body had become illusory, and then he'd appeared over 1 kilometer away. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. In the distance, the Holy Lord glared at Yi Xian and the monarch hound. His face was ugly to the extreme. He never imagined that he would be forced into such a corner by Yi Xian and the monarch hound. Just as the emperor dog was about to attack again, a black shadow suddenly attacked from behind. The Saint Lord turned around abruptly, and when he saw the figure, his face changed. He turned around and disappeared. Soon, a black figure appeared in front of Yi Xian and the emperor hound. It was a Gue. Yi Xian was about to speak when a Gue suddenly said, "Let's go back first." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Wei Yang Shi." A Gue was taken aback by the way Yi Xian addressed him, but he didn't think too much about it and said, "They can't do anything to you. Come with me now." Yi Xian nodded, "Let's go." Soon Yi Xian, a Gue, and the emperor hound passed through the spatial tunnel and returned to the burial sky Great Wall. When they arrived at the burial sky Great Wall, Yi Xian's face changed. At this moment, outside the burial sky Great Wall, there were several huge spatial teleportation arrays, and one could vaguely see a passage in them. On the city wall, Yi Xian looked at a Gue. "Senior, this is?" A Gue said in a low voice, "Spatial teleportation. The Mo clan's army will be teleported here through this spatial tunnel." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "They still have an army?" A Gue looked at Yi Xian. "The Mo clan isn't a single clan, it's made up of countless clans." As he spoke, he looked up at the horizon, and there were tremors from time to time. Yi Xian said, "They're fighting?" A Gue nodded. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment, a group of people suddenly appeared in the largest spatial teleportation array nearby, led by Xie. Beside Xie, Yi Xian also saw a familiar person, Xie, who fought him before. A Gue said softly, "They're here." At this time, people appeared above the burial sky Great Wall. Yi Xian glanced at them. There were many familiar faces and many unfamiliar faces. Clearly, Mr. Bai and a Gue had summoned back the unending geniuses who were outside. At this time, a Gue suddenly said beside Yi Xian, "Next is your battlefield." As he spoke, he quietly retreated. Yi Xian looked down. Clearly, it was the old against the old, and the young against the young. Neither side could afford to lose. If the older ones lost, such as Never-Ending Sky and the others, they would definitely die. If the younger ones lost, the Never-Ending Starfield would have no future. Moreover, the geniuses of the Mo clan would be able to enter the Never-Ending Starfield. When that time came, the old generation would be held back, and no one could stop them. Below, Xie led Wuxia and the others to the city wall, but soon, they rose into the air and came to the opposite side of the city wall, facing Yi Xian and the others from afar. Yi Xian noticed that apart from Xie and the others, he also noticed the black-robed man who fought with him earlier. Ever since he appeared, his eyes had been locked on him. Yi Xian flashed his middle finger at the black-robed man. In the distance, the black-robed man was instantly enraged. He pointed at Yi Xian and said, "Yi Xian, come out and die." On the city wall, Yi Xian leaped and came in front of the black-robed man. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Let me say this first. If you are afraid of death, get someone else. I really don't want to fight with someone who runs away after fighting." The black-robed man glared at Yi Xian. "You are too arrogant, you." Yi Xian suddenly shook his head. "If you want to fight, then fight. Don't talk so much nonsense." At the side, Wuxia suddenly said, "Brother Xianxia, if you don't want to fight, then let me do it." As he said that, he walked out. The black-robed man named Xianxia said in a deep voice, "He is from the foreign land." Besides Wuxia, Xianxia suddenly said angrily, "Then hurry up and fight. If you don't fight, others will think that the Mok clan is afraid of Yixian. Di Sha, who rarely spoke, also nodded slightly. If you don't dare to fight, the Mok clan will do it ourselves. The black-robed man and the woman behind him had an ugly expression on their faces. Contempt. They could feel that the Mok clan and the never-ending star region were looking down on them. The woman behind Song Yu was about to attack, but Song Yu stopped her. "Let me do it." After saying that, he disappeared into thin air. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Yixian. Song Yu looked at Yixian and was about to speak. At that moment, a ray of sword gleam came quietly. The sword gleam was silent like the air. When he felt the sword gleam, Song Yu's expression changed drastically. He put his hands together and a black and blue shield appeared in front of him. The sword arrived. Boom! The shield shattered instantly. However, at that moment, Song Yu took a quick step forward and threw a punch. On his fist, a powerful force swept out. At that moment, a ray of sword gleam arrived. Boom! The moment the sword and fist collided, Song Yu retreated rapidly. In the process of his retreat, a ray of sword gleam quietly arrived. A flying sword again. Song Yu's pupils constricted. He stomped his right foot and borrowed the power of space to stop himself. Forcing himself to stop, he slapped his chest with both hands. Boom! Song Yu's body trembled violently. Immediately after, a powerful aura swept out from his body. After this powerful aura appeared, the surrounding space instantly began to tremble. Everyone's gaze turned to this side. Zuoqing said softly, "Secret technique." Mo Xie nodded slightly. The people of this region are all good at secret techniques. It's a pity that there isn't any ancient secret technique. If there is an ancient secret technique, Zuoqing looked at Mo Xie. Mo Xie smiled. If it's an ancient secret technique, even I would have to be wary. In the distance, Song Yu's body grew bigger and bigger. In a short period of time, his body grew at least a few times bigger than before. At the same time, his aura was more than a few times stronger than before. Song Yu stared fixedly at Yixian. In the next moment he charged towards Yixian. Every single step he took caused the space here to tremble violently. It was an extremely shocking scene. Yixian stood there silently with his sword in hand. When Song Yu arrived before him, Yixian suddenly leaped up, drew his sword, and slashed down. A sword howl resounded through the sky. A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of Song Yu's mouth when he saw Yixian's sword slashing down. He smashed his fist forward, and the powerful force caused the space in an area of a few hundred meters to tremble as if it was on the verge of shattering. It was an extremely shocking scene. On the other hand, Yixian's sword continued to descend. However, his sword had suddenly transformed into the soul-suppressing sword. Boom! A figure was blasted flying. It was none other than Yixian. However, everyone was looking at Song Yu. After Song Yu blasted Yixian away with a punch, his soul was separated from his body. Not only that, but his soul was also fixed on the spot, unable to move. Song Yu's soul looked around in terror, and his face was filled with confusion. Everyone was also slightly confused. What's going on? In the distance, Yixian stood up. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at Song Yu. Song Yu glared at Yixian. "What did you do to me?" Yixian grinned. He raised the soul-suppressing sword and said softly, "Withdraw." As soon as he finished speaking, Song Yu's soul directly turned into a black ray of light and entered the soul-suppressing sword. The entire place fell silent. Mo Xie and the rest also looked at Yixian. Zuoqing said solemnly, "What sword is that?" Mo Xie said softly, "It should be the legendary soul-suppressing sword. According to ancient records, this sword is the sword of the Nether clan's Nether King that disappeared. How did it fall into his hands? Strange." As he spoke, he looked at Zuoqing. "If you fight him, be careful of this sword. It's extremely destructive to the soul. Although your physique is special, don't underestimate your opponent." Zuoqing nodded. "I understand." In the distance, after Yixian used the soul-suppressing sword to absorb Song Yu's soul, he turned around and walked away. Zuoqin, who stood beside Xie, said in a deep voice, "I'll attack." As soon as he finished speaking, Xie suddenly said, "Someone's coming." A voice suddenly resounded in the sky. "The Outlander isn't dead yet. It's not your Mo clan's turn to attack." As soon as the voice resounded, the space in the sky split open, and then a man holding a spear walked out. The man wore plain clothes, and the spear in his hand was wrapped in cloth. His eyes were as sharp as a knife. Xie chuckled. "You're finally here?" Chapter 468. In the air, the spear-wielding man slowly walked towards Yixian. Soon he arrived in front of Yixian. He was about to attack when Yixian suddenly said, "I want to heal my injuries." Everyone, the spear-wielding man was also stunned. "Heal your injuries?" Yixian nodded. "I was seriously injured in the battle with the Outlander geniuses just now. Are you trying to take advantage of me?" Hearing this, the spear-wielding man's expression suddenly turned ugly. "Am I, Yi Ji, the kind of person who would take advantage of others?" Yixian hurriedly said, "That's good. I'm leaving then." With that, he turned and left without any hesitation. Everyone, the man called Yi Ji, was also a little dumbfounded. Obviously, he had not expected Yixian to do this. At that moment, a man appeared in front of Yi Ji. It was Zhou Xingxing. Zhou Xingxing glanced at Yi Ji and gently turned the spear in his hand. "I play with spears. You play with spears too. Let's have a spar?" Yi Ji said calmly, "I'll keep you company." Zhou Xingxing grinned. With a shake of his body, he directly charged towards Yi Ji. In next to no time, numerous explosions resounded incessantly. On the other side, Zuoqin, who was beside Xie, suddenly said, "What now?" Xie smiled. "Fight." Hearing this, the heaven fiends and earth fiends behind him flew to the opposite side. At that moment, two people suddenly flew out from the city walls. Soon, both sides began to fight. Meanwhile, Yixian had already returned to the stone house. He sat cross-legged on the ground, took out the purple source crystals, and began to absorb them crazily. The emperor dog had also entered the prison pagoda and was also digesting them crazily. In the prison pagoda, the only person who was relatively free was Xiaoling. She was now nurturing her spirit fruits and spirit trees every day, especially the third and fourth floors, which were filled with spirit trees. There was originally no one on the third floor, so naturally, it became hers. As for the fourth floor, after Jian Zizai left, it also became hers. However, the only thing she was afraid of was the fifth floor. Every time she went to the fourth floor to water the spirit fruits, she was very fast and would run out in no time. Seeing that Yixian was recuperating, Xiaolinger did not disturb him. She sat opposite Yixian and looked at Yixian with her chin resting on her hands. 2 hours later, when Yixian had recovered from his injuries, Xiaolinger hurriedly ran to him. Yixian gently rubbed Xiaolinger's little head. "Are you worried about the fifth floor?" Xiaolinger shook her head. I'm not afraid." Yixian smiled and said, "I know, Xiaolinger is very courageous." Lil Linger blinked. Then, as if by magic, she took out a red fruit and handed it to Yixian. "Eat it." Yixian took the fruit and looked at it. The fruit was crystal clear and exuded a strong fruity fragrance. At first glance, he could tell that it was not an ordinary item. Yixian took a bite. It was very sweet and crispy. Most importantly, he felt a wave of energy enter his body and then be absorbed by it. "Good stuff." Yixian looked at Xiaolinger and said with a smile, "Thank you." Xiaolinger grinned, then turned around and went to the second floor with a few spirit fruits in her arms. Unknowingly, she had already regarded Yixian and the god on the second floor as her family. After Yixian finished eating the spirit fruit, he came to the side of the emperor hound. The emperor hound was lying on the ground, constantly exuding a powerful aura around its body. Yixian knew that the emperor hound should also be upgraded. It should be noted that it had devoured a lot of demon beasts in the foreign territory. The foreign territory. If this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Thinking of the foreign territory, Yixian quickly took out a storage ring. Inside the storage ring was the treasure he had obtained in the foreign territory. In fact, he did not obtain any good treasures in the foreign territory. He only obtained a few sacred weapons and a little more than 30 million purple origin crystals. Although he was a little disappointed, Yixian also knew that this was normal. After all, the really good treasures were definitely kept close to the person and would not be placed in the house. However, it was still better than nothing. Especially now, he also needed purple origin crystals, because every time he healed or broke through, he needed a huge amount of purple origin crystals. Yixian glanced at the Emperor Hound and did not disturb it. Just as he was about to leave, the god on the second floor suddenly said, "Come." Yixian looked up at the second floor, and the next moment he directly appeared on the second floor. In the second floor, the god on the second floor said in a deep voice, "At most half a month." Yixian was puzzled. "What do you mean?" The god on the second floor looked at him. "At most half a month, the fifth floor will be able to come out." Hearing this, Yixian's face suddenly darkened. "Can you stop that guy?" The god on the second floor shook his head. "Not only can I not stop it, even Jian Zizai will not be able to." T. At this time, the Emperor Hound on the first floor suddenly said angrily, "What is the fifth floor? How can she not stop it?" The god on the second floor glanced down. "You know nothing about the power of the fifth floor." The Emperor Hound sneered, "You know nothing about the Protoss." At this time, the god on the second floor suddenly disappeared. Boom! A loud noise suddenly came from the first floor, and then Yixian heard the Emperor Hound wailing. Yixian shook his head. Although this Emperor Hound was very powerful, his intuition told him that the god on the second floor was even more terrifying. This was because the god on the second floor was locked up here, and in the entire Protoss, only Jian Zizai was qualified to be locked up here. This Emperor Hound provoked the god on the second floor, and it was asking for abuse. A moment later, the god on the second floor returned to the second floor. She glanced at Yixian. "Is there a problem?" Yixian quickly shook his head. "No problem." He did not forget that the god on the second floor had a hotter temper than Jian Zizai. The god on the second floor glanced coldly at Yixian. "In half a month, either you find the Dao rule or bring her back with that sword, or you will die." Yixian said in a deep voice, "Do I have no chance of winning?" The god on the second floor said calmly, "Tell me, what are your chances of winning? They can pinch you to death with one finger." Yixian was expressionless. "I can perish together with them." The god on the second floor said, "Detonate the world prison tower?" Yixian nodded. The god on the second floor looked at Yixian with pity. What will you use to detonate this tower? You can die 100 times and this tower will not have a problem." Yixian's face sank. "So, if I die, this tower will not care about me, right?" The god on the second floor said calmly, "What do you think?" Yixian was expressionless. "Then I will give it away. I don't want it anymore." The god on the second floor twitched her eyes and shook her head slightly. "It can be considered a talent." Yixian. The god on the second floor said, "Do you really put all your hopes on others?" Yixian was silent for a moment, then said, "What can I do? You tell me if I go to the fifth floor now, I won't be able to beat him. Anyway, I have decided. And then if I have to die, I'll fuck him as hard as I can, and, this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The 7th, 8th, and 9th floor will be released, and everyone will have fun together." The god on the second floor looked at Yixian, and Yixian said seriously, "I really think so. Many times, many things could not be done by human strength." When faced with such a situation, Yixian made up his mind, that was to die together with everyone. Anyway, he had already prepared for the worst. After all, he really could not beat him. At least not now. And in the future. He was also very clear, it was very likely that there would be no future. The god on the second floor suddenly waved his hand, "Go out." Yixian turned and left. When he walked to the door, he suddenly stopped, then said softly, "Second floor god, you have helped me enough. You can leave at any time, really." After that, he disappeared at the door. He had always been grateful to the god on the second floor. Because the god had indeed helped him too much, And now, he really did not have the face to let him fight with the fifth floor. Because the fifth floor's target should be him and the tower. Therefore, if the god on the second floor wanted to leave, especially now, the fifth floor would definitely not target her. As for himself, he did not think too much. He was indifferent to life and death, and he would fight if he was not satisfied. After Yi Xian left the prison tower, he came to the burial sky Great Wall. At the moment, below, Yi Ji and Zhou Shengxing were already fighting fiercely. Both of them were using spears, and the battle was extremely intense. On the other side, Sky Sha and Earth Sha were also fighting with two never-ending star region geniuses. These two geniuses Yi Xian had never seen before. They were two men, and both were extremely strong. However, they were completely suppressed by Sky Sha and Earth Sha, and could only defend passively. If this continued, defeat was only a matter of time. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then turned to look at Mo Xian not far away. This Mo Xie gave him a feeling that she was unfathomable. He had only felt this from some old monsters. As if sensing Yi Xian's gaze, Mo Xie suddenly looked at him. Seeing Yi Xian, Mo Xie smiled slightly. Behind Mo Xie, the red-haired woman suddenly said, "I will go fight him." Mo Xie frowned slightly. "Ah, Feng." Hearing this, the woman stopped and looked at Mo Xie. "Are you afraid that I can't beat him?" Mo Xie shook his head. "You have other opponents. He is Zuoqing's." As he spoke, he looked at Zuoqing. Zuoqing nodded slightly, then walked towards Yi Xian not far away. Ah Feng said coldly, "Can't you let me have him? I have been unhappy with him for a long time." Mo Xie said, "Think of the big picture." "Big picture?" Ah Feng humphed coldly and did not say anything else. In the distance, Zuoqing walked in front of Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Last time was considered a draw, right?" Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Yes." Just as Zuoqing said, the last time, the two of them could only be considered a draw. Zuoqing smiled and said, "Then this time, let's decide the winner." As he spoke, he slowly raised his right hand. In an instant, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth began to gather at this moment. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then looked up at Zuoqing and smiled. "What's the point of deciding the winner? Let's fight to the death." Fight to the death. As soon as Yi Xian's voice fell, the sound of a sword soared into the sky, straight into the clouds, and shook the sky. P.S. I went out for a walk in the past 2 days. There are really a lot of people in the city. Also, I don't think it's suitable for me to play in my line of work because I have to carry a computer everywhere I go. End of this chapter. Chapter 469. At this moment, the gazes of countless people moved towards Yi Xian and Zuoqing. Yi Xian walked towards Zuoqing with his sword in hand. Zuoqing opened his right hand, and a saber suddenly appeared in his grasp. The saber was over 1 m long, and its back was extremely wide. It seemed like a machete. At this moment, Yi Xian in the distance suddenly disappeared. At the instant that Yi Xian vanished, Zuoqing slowly closed his eyes. In the next moment, he took a step forward and swung his saber with both hands. This space was fragile like paper before this strike, and it was directly torn apart. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword arrived before him. It was a head-on collision. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded, and then the space in the surroundings trembled violently. After that, both of them retreated explosively. At the moment that Yi Xian retreated, a ray of light silently flashed. Zuoqing's expression instantly changed drastically. However, he reacted extremely quickly because he'd been prepared for it. So, he'd raised his saber to block it as soon as Yi Xian's flying sword had appeared. Bang! The flying sword arrived before him, causing his saber to tremble violently, and then Zuoqing retreated repeatedly again. However, he hadn't even stopped when Yi Xian appeared in front of him once more. After that, he saw Yi Xian suddenly draw his sword. Zuoqing's eyes narrowed slightly, and he'd already thought of numerous ways to deal with it. But right at this moment, Yi Xian's sword left its sheath. Zuoqing's saber slashed horizontally. However, Yi Xian's soul had suddenly left its sheath as well. At this moment, it wasn't just one Yi Xian, but two. This sudden and unexpected event caused Wuqing's expression to change, and he decisively chose to attack Yi Xian's body. However, Yi Xian's soul sword was even swifter, and it slashed towards his head. Wuqing had no choice but to switch from offense to defense, and he raised his saber horizontally. Bang! The sword descended. Wuqing retreated rapidly, and Yi Xian's soul had already returned to his body. At the same time, a flying sword pierced through Wuqing's chest. When Yi Xian appeared in front of Wuqing again, Wuqing suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian suddenly turned around, and a broadsword slashed at his head. Yi Xian gently tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and his whole body flashed 100 feet behind him. Wuqing's saber still fell, and a saber chi flashed across the field like lightning. Yi Xian raised his sword and stabbed. Boom! The saber energy shattered with a loud bang. Opposite Yi Xian, Wuqing glanced at her abdomen. There was a sword hole there, but it was healing at an extremely fast rate. Wuqing looked up at Yi Xian, who was not far away, and said softly, "Your sword is really fast. Also, the combination of your soul and your physical body is indeed incredible." Yi Xian said, "Your physique is very special." Under normal circumstances, his sword could have taken Wuqing's life. However, it seemed that Wuqing was completely fine. Wuqing smiled and said, "Let's continue." With that, he suddenly charged at Yi Xian with the long saber in hand. His speed became faster and faster, and when he arrived in front of Yi Xian, there was a row of afterimages behind him. That was because he was too fast. Soon, Wuqing arrived in front of Yi Xian, and he slashed at Yi Xian with the saber in both hands. Annihilation. As the saber fell, a black saber light quietly condensed on the blade. In an instant, the space where the blade passed was directly shattered and annihilated. In front of Wuqing, the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet suddenly began to tremble. Soon, an immeasurable amount of earth energy converged towards him. At the same time, the space energy in the surrounding space converged towards him like a tide. Soon, Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed. Hum! A sword hum shook the sky. Boom! The space around Yi Xian and Wuqing was directly shattered. At the same time, Yi Xian and Wuqing retreated rapidly, and as Yi Xian retreated, flying swords flew towards Wuqing from a short distance away. These flying swords were extremely fast, and they were all aimed at Wuqing's vital points. These flying swords were extremely fast, and they were all aimed at Wuqing's vital points. In front of Yi Xian, Wuqing retreated rapidly, and at the same time, the large saber in his hand kept slashing horizontally. At this moment, Yi Xian's figure trembled, and he directly rushed towards Wuqing. As he rushed over, countless flying swords flew towards Wuqing. On the other side, Xianxia frowned slightly. Beside Xianxia, the woman named Feng said in a deep voice, "Wuqing is being suppressed." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "This person's flying sword is so fast." Xianxia nodded slightly. "In terms of speed, it's indeed not bad." As he spoke, he looked at Wuqing with a trace of worry in his eyes. At this moment, a loud noise suddenly came from afar. As the loud noise resounded, Yi Xian and Wuqing retreated rapidly. After Wuqing stopped, a ray of sword light quietly appeared in front of him. Wuqing's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly clasped his hands together. Boom! The clasping of his hands directly blocked a flying sword, but he was forced to retreat rapidly. At the same time, numerous flying swords pierced through his body, and one of them even pierced through the space between his eyebrows. As everyone watched, Wuqing only stopped after retreating a full 300 meters. At this moment, Wuqing's entire body was pierced by flying swords. Everyone's expression changed when they saw this scene. Flying swords? Fear. Deep fear. Even the woman named Feng's eyes were filled with fear. Not only were these flying swords powerful, but they were also fast, making them impossible to defend against. At this moment, everyone suddenly looked at Wuqing, and under everyone's astonished gazes, Wuqing's body actually began to rapidly recover. Seeing this scene, the faces of the geniuses above buried sky city immediately darkened. Was he unkillable? Yi Xian's expression was also somewhat ugly. Just now, his flying swords had struck Zhuo Qing's vital points, but even so, they still couldn't kill him? Was he really unkillable? Not far away, Zhuo Qing took a deep breath. At this moment, the sword wounds on his body had all healed, but his face was much paler. Zhuo Qing looked at the distant Yi Xian, and his hands slowly clenched. For a moment, the surrounding space began to tremble violently. In the distance, Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Little soul, do you know what kind of physique he has? Is it an invincible physique?" Little soul said, "I don't know." Yi Xian. At this moment, the god on the second floor suddenly said, "It should be the legendary immortal physique." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Is he really unkillable?" The god on the second floor said softly, "Of course not. If I'm not mistaken, what you see now is not this person's true body." "Not his true body?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" The god on the second floor said, "What you see now is condensed from the qi of heaven and earth. Your sword can only consume him, but can't kill him at all. Unless you kill him more than 100 times and completely exhaust him to death." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Damn, isn't this physique invincible?" The god on the second floor said, "Your physique and bloodline are even more terrifying than his." Yi Xian was stunned, then asked, "What kind of physique do I have? Didn't Little Soul say that I have an ordinary physique?" The god on the second floor said, "Did I say anything?" Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian found that the surrounding space began to tremble violently. Soon, the surrounding space cracked, and endless dark matter energy seeped out from these spaces. Seeing this, Yi Xian's face darkened. As if thinking of something, the Tao of space suddenly condensed between his eyebrows. The next moment, the surrounding space directly healed at the speed of an international card. Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian gently waved his right hand, and all the space in the field returned to normal. Everyone, opposite Yi Xian, Zhuo Qing looked at Yi Xian. His big move was gone just like that. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly walked towards Zhuo Qing with his sword. Zhuo Qing slowly clenched his right hand, and a powerful force condensed in his hand. Yi Xian suddenly leaped, directly above Zhuo Qing's head. The next moment, he held the sword with both hands and slashed at Zhuo Qing. As the sword fell, there was a sharp tearing sound. In front of Yi Xian, Zhuo Qing suddenly blasted a punch at Yi Xian. The punch was thrown. Boom! The space in front of Yi Xian was directly shattered, and Yi Xian was knocked back. However, several sword flashes directly slashed at Zhuo Qing's body, and Zhuo Qing also retreated. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly rushed in front of him, and the next moment, sword flashes crisscrossed. Countless sword flashes wrapped around Zhuo Qing like a huge net. The two began to fight hand to hand, and a series of explosions sounded continuously in the field. Yi Xian knew very well that he had no way of finding Zhuo Qing's real body. Therefore, he could only exhaust Zhuo Qing to death. After the two began to fight in close combat, Yi Xian began to crush Zhuo Qing in all aspects. Because of his soul separation and flying sword, Zhuo Qing was beginning to be unable to block them. Just like that, Zhuo Qing began to retreat. Not far away, Xia looked at Yi Xian and Zhuo Qing expressionlessly. No one knew what he was thinking. Next to Xia, Feng said in a deep voice, "If this goes on, Zhuo Qing will be exhausted to death by this swordsman." Xia did not speak. Feng stared at Yi Xian and Zhuo Qing not far away. Her right hand slowly clenched, and she was ready to attack at any time. Above buried Heaven City, the faces of the war army and the others softened when they saw this scene. Below the city wall, Yi Xian and Zhuo Qing were already wrapped in sword flashes. Within the sword flashes, a series of explosions sounded continuously. Just like that, after about 15 minutes, a loud noise suddenly sounded from within the sword flashes. Immediately after, the sword flashes exploded, and Yi Xian and Zhuo Qing were separated. Just as Yi Xian retreated, a ray of sword flashed through Zhuo Qing's throat. Zhuo Qing's head fell directly. Everyone stared at Zuoqing. Soon, under everyone's gaze, Zuoqing actually grew a new head. Seeing this scene, the faces of the war army and the others suddenly became extremely ugly. She really could not be killed. Yi Xian stood quietly with his sword in hand. He was also covered in injuries, but he was not as terrifying as Zuoqing, and his injuries would heal on their own. In the distance, Zuoqing slowly clenched his fists, and the surrounding spiritual energy began to gather toward him. Soon, the surrounding space and ground began to tremble. Zuoqing stared at Yi Xian. "You can't kill me." As soon as he said that, he slowly raised his right hand. In an instant, the surrounding spiritual energy swept toward Yi Xian like a river. Not far away, Yi Xian stood quietly. Suddenly, the space Dao law quietly condensed between his brows. The next moment, under his control, the surrounding space began to collapse and annihilate inch by inch. Along with the collapse and annihilation, the surrounding spiritual energy also collapsed and annihilated, destroying the spiritual energy. Seeing this scene, Xia's expression changed. Feng was about to attack when Xia glanced at her expressionlessly. They're fighting one-on-one, a fair duel. Feng's expression was a little ugly. Are we just going to watch? Xia said softly, he can die, but he can't lose face. Feng suddenly said angrily, I don't care. He's our friend. I can't watch him die. As soon as she said that, she rushed out. Xia frowned slightly. At this moment, Feng suddenly stopped not far away. He turned his head abruptly and saw a long saber cutting through the air from his right. Chapter 470. Feng's expression was cold as she punched out to the right. Boom! The saber was forced to a stop by this force. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared behind the saber. Then, she grabbed the saber's hilt with her right hand and spun. Bang! Feng retreated over 30 meters. Feng looked at the woman in front of her. She wore a black dress, and on it was a lifelike black phoenix. The phoenix's eyes were like lightning, looking down on everything. Feng frowned. Who are you? I've never seen you before. The woman ignored Feng and turned to look at the place where Yi Xian and Zuoqing were fighting. At this moment, the battle between the two had already ended. The gazes of everyone present fell onto Yi Xian because he was the only one left there. Seeing this, Feng's expression turned savage. She charged at Yi Xian, but the woman in the black dress suddenly disappeared. Boom! With a loud explosion, Feng stopped on the spot. Feng's expression turned savage. She clenched her fists and a powerful aura swept out from her body. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded out from behind her, "Stand down." Feng turned and glared at Xia, "Watch him die." At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded out from behind Xia. Feng. Hearing this voice, Feng was stunned. Everyone present was stunned as well. Everyone turned to look behind Xia, only to see a man walking out. This man was Zuoqing. However, his face was extremely pale, without a single trace of blood, and he looked extremely weak. Feng looked at Zuoqing in shock. "You?" Zuoqing said softly, "He's not dead yet." Then he looked at Yi Xian, who was not far away. "You won." In the distance, Yi Xian held his sword and supported himself on the ground. He looked extremely exhausted. Just now, he had used the Space Dao Law to frantically destroy the spirit energy within 300 feet of him. After the spirit energy was completely destroyed, he killed Zuoqing's fake body with one slash. Just as he expected, without spirit energy, this fake body could no longer be revived. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at the woman in the black dress beside him in surprise. "You?" He naturally recognized the person in front of him. It was Lian Wanli from the Azure World. He had never forgotten this woman. Lian Wanli laughed and said, "Is it that strange?" Yi Xian nodded. Lian Wanli smiled. "I heard you were here, so I came to look for you." Yi Xian was stunned. "Why are you looking for me?" Lian Wanli blinked. "Sure." Yi Xian asked subconsciously, "What are we playing?" Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian. "What do you want to play?" Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Lien Wanli turned to look at Ah Feng, who was not far away. "Let's play?" Ah Feng sneered. "I have the same intention." As soon as she finished speaking, she dashed out like an arrow. Lien Wanli smiled and charged forward with the Azure Dragon Saber in his hand. Boom! The woman named Ah Feng was instantly pushed back, but the next moment, she charged forward again. Seeing the two of them fighting, Yi Xian was somewhat shocked. Lien Wanli's strength was many times stronger than before. Very strong. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Actually, he was not the only one who had grown. While he was growing, others were also growing. At this moment, he thought of Mo Yunqi and company. He wondered how they were doing. But they should not be too bad. After all, he had given them quite a number of purple source crystals and good stuff. Mo Yunqi and company were not inferior to the people of the Heaven Domain. They were not inferior to the people of the Heaven Domain. The only thing they lacked was resources. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned his head. Not far away, Xianxia and Daoist had collapsed. On the burial sky Great Wall, the war army and company did not help. It was not that they were heartless. Here, the never-ending star field and the desolate race were abiding by a rule. In a duel, they were responsible for their own lives. Outsiders were not to interfere. In the past, the never-ending star field had killed many people from the desolate race, but the desolate race did not help either. Furthermore, they could not be saved. Because if one side helped, someone from the other side would definitely stop them. It was very cruel, but there was no other way. After looking at the two corpses on the ground for a long time, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Xianxia. "Let's play." Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "You were injured just now, and so was I. It's very fair." Xianxia looked at Yi Xian and nodded. "All right." With that said, he charged straight at Yi Xian. At this moment, the distant Yi Xian suddenly turned around and left. Behind Yi Xian, Xianxia was still charging. But as he charged, when he arrived behind Yi Xian, his head fell off. He fell down without a sound. Upon seeing this scene, everyone present was shocked. Not far away, Mo Xie stared at Yi Xian with a deadpan expression. Just now, only a few people present had seen how Yi Xian had attacked, and he was one of them. Beside Mo Xie, Zuoqing said in a low voice, "Impossible. Absolutely impossible." Mo Xie said softly, "He used a mystic technique. That mystic technique made his sword move at least 5 times faster. Xianxia cannot block that kind of speed." Zuoqing's expression was ugly. 5 times? Isn't that invincible? Mo Xie looked at Yi Xian. "He is very weak now. Anyone can easily kill him." Zuoqing was silent. Now was the time when Yi Xian was at his weakest, but they could not attack at this time. Because Yi Xian had already run away. Even if he did not run away, they would not attack. If they attacked now, the Mo clan would undoubtedly be looked down upon by the never-ending starfield. The never-ending starfield could afford to lose, but so could the Mo clan. At that moment, a loud sound came from not far away. Everyone looked over and saw the Mo clan woman named Ah Feng retreating rapidly. This time, she retreated a full 1,000 feet. The moment Ah Feng stopped, blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. Across from her, Lien Wanli glanced at Ah Feng and said with a smile, "Is my saber powerful?" Ah Feng stared at Lien Wanli. Lien Wanli gently stroked the hair by his ear with his left hand and said with a smile, "Are you not convinced?" Ah Feng laughed sinisterly. "I'm not convinced." Lien Wanli nodded. "I'll beat you into submission." As soon as she finished speaking, she charged at Ah Feng with her long saber in hand. Her speed increased, and everywhere she passed, space trembled. Ah Feng's expression gradually turned ferocious. She slammed her hands on the ground. Boom! The entire ground shattered. The next moment, an afterimage flashed across the battlefield. After this afterimage, countless afterimages followed. In the distance, Lien Wanli twisted his wrist, raised his saber, and slashed downward. "I'll kill you!" The saber fell. Like a piece of paper, the space was directly torn apart. Ah Feng punched out with both fists and roared, "Break!" Boom! The surrounding space trembled, and in the next moment, a figure retreated explosively. This figure was Ah Feng. As soon as Ah Feng stopped, Lian Wanli, who was not far away, threw the Azure Dragon saber in front of him. The saber slashed across, tearing space apart. Shrill sounds rang out incessantly. Ah Feng raised her head to look at the saber. She sensed the power contained within it, and her face turned solemn. In the next moment, she clasped her hands together, and the space in front of her began to shrink, forming a thick spatial barrier in front of her. At this time, Lian Wanli's saber arrived. Boom! The spatial barrier trembled violently, and then began to crumble inch by inch. However, just as the saber broke through the spatial barrier, Ah Feng suddenly clasped the Azure Dragon saber with both hands, and in the next moment, she slashed down along the saber with extreme speed. In an instant, she arrived in front of Lian Wanli, and then she used her hands as a saber and slashed towards Lian Wanli's abdomen. However, Lian Wanli was even faster. Before Ah Feng's hands could touch his abdomen, Lian Wanli's hands had already grabbed her by the throat. Under everyone's gazes, Lian Wanli grabbed Ah Feng by the throat and smashed her to the ground. Bang! The ground shook violently. In the next moment, Lian Wanli kicked Ah Feng's abdomen. Bang! Ah Feng's entire body flew hundreds of meters away, and then, Lian Wanli raised his right hand, head lift. As soon as he finished speaking, Ah Feng's head flew from her neck. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Lian Wanli glanced coldly at Ah Feng's corpse, and then he turned around and left with his saber. At the side, Xia looked at Ah Feng's corpse, and after a moment of silence, he looked at Lian Wanli. At this moment, a loud sound came from the horizon. At this moment, everyone raised their heads to look at the sky. At this moment, they remembered that there was still a battlefield in the sky. Everyone looked at the sky. That was where the never-ending star field and the Moke clan's strongest fighters were fighting. If the victor was decided there, then everything would be settled. Because no matter how talented the prodigies on both sides were, they could not change the outcome of the battle. The sky trembled. Below, everyone was waiting. As for Yi Xian, he had already returned to the stone house. Recuperate. Right now, he only wanted to recuperate and then sleep. Because the battle with Zuoqing had drained a lot of his energy, and in order to kill that Tian Sha, he did not hesitate to use his secret skill, and the secret skill would backfire. Right now, he was suffering from the backfire. His entire body was extremely exhausted, and he had no energy at all. It was as if his blood and marrow had been sucked dry. It was too uncomfortable. Absorb. Yi Xian began to absorb the purple origin crystal crazily. As the endless purple origin crystal energy entered his body, Yi Xian felt slightly better. At this moment, Lian Wanli walked in. Lian Wanli walked up to Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. She smiled and said, "You are much stronger than before." Yi Xian looked at Lian Wanli and smiled. "You too." Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian and shook her head. "You didn't even tell me before you left Azure Firmament World. You are too mean." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I left in a hurry." With that, he paused and hurriedly said, "By the way, why are you here?" Lian Wanli blinked. "I came to look for you." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "Why are you looking for me?" Lian Wanli smirked. "Take a guess." Yi Xian hesitated and then said, "Miss Lian, don't tell me you have feelings for me?" Lian Wanli blinked. The next moment, she raised her right hand toward Yi Xian and said, "Head lift." P.S. Holiday is over. Work hard on writing. Actually, he did not really want to go out to play. He was forced to go out by his family. They said that staying in the house all day would cause mold. Home was more comfortable. Writing and watching movies was more comfortable. Chapter 471. Headlift. As Lian Wanli said that, Yi Xian's entire body was lifted up by her. However, his head was not separated. Lian Wanli held Yi Xian and said with a smile, "I have never seen such a thick-skinned person in my life." Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Wanli put Yi Xian down and said, "Let's fight after we recover." Then she turned and left. Inside the stone house, Yixian shook his head and smiled. He had to admit that it was a good feeling to see old friends. At that moment, he missed Mo Yunqi and the others even more. He wondered how those guys were doing. After a while, Yixian collected his thoughts and continued to heal. After Lian Wanli left the stone house, she went to the city wall. At that moment, everyone was looking at the void in the horizon. Lian Wanli looked up and said softly, "The fight is really intense." At that moment, a loud sound came from the void. Then, under everyone's gaze, Mr. Bai and the others appeared in the sky. Mr. Bai was the leader, and behind him were Li Changfeng and the others. At that moment, Li Changfeng and the others looked extremely serious. Especially Li Changfeng. This was his first time fighting with a powerful Mok clan. His opponent's strength was beyond his expectations. Mr. Bai looked at a middle-aged man in front of him and said softly, "Mo, I don't think it's possible for you to conquer the never-ending starfield with your strength." The middle-aged man named Mo smiled and said, "Don't worry, it's just the beginning." At that moment, the space within tens of thousands of miles collapsed into a spider web. Everyone was horrified. Soon, under everyone's gaze, the space nearby suddenly split open, and a man and a woman appeared out of thin air. The woman was Wei Yang Tian, and the man was the leader of the Mok clan, Mo Tianqi. Mo Tianqi placed his right hand behind his back and looked at Wei Yang Tian expressionlessly. Wei Yang Tian's lips carried a hint of mockery. "Mo Tianqi, I originally thought that you and I would fight fair and square. I didn't expect you to collude with the other side to play this kind of trick. To be honest, compared to your father from back then, you are not just a little bit lacking. At the very least, he challenged me to the death." Mo Tianqi remained expressionless. Just as he was about to speak, Wei Yang Tian suddenly punched out. Boom! The space around Mo Tianqi shook violently. Then, Mo Tianqi retreated nearly 1,000 feet. Just as Wei Yang Tian was about to continue, the space around her trembled violently. Following that, the space around her tore apart, as a number of black chains shot out, sealing the space around her. At the same time, 4 black-robed men appeared, each of them wielding a thick black tome in their left hand, and a black staff in their right. Seeing the 4 of them, the expressions of Mr. Bai and the rest changed. "Sacred sorcerers." Hearing Mr. Bai's words, Li Changfeng frowned. "What do you mean?" Mr. Bai's expression turned ugly. "The ultimate experts from the other side are proficient in all kinds of secret techniques and ancient secret techniques. The palace lord has a clone being held back." Saying this, he made a prompt decision. However, as soon as they attacked, Emogio and the rest suddenly blocked their way. Emogio grinned. "Mr. Bai, it's better for you to stay here." Mr. Bai tilted his head. "Wait on guard." As soon as Mr. Bai's voice fell, 4 black-robed men suddenly appeared not far behind Mr. Bai. The 4 black-robed men each held a giant sword in their right hand and a round shield in their left. Leading them was a Gue. Wei on guard, Wei on star. The most outstanding warriors nurtured by the other side. A Gue led the 4 people behind him and charged towards the 4 black-robed men in the sky. Not far away, Emogio suddenly said, "Where is General Emoku?" As soon as Emogio's voice fell, 9 experts wearing black armor and holding long spears suddenly appeared in front of a Gue and the rest. "General Emoku?" Mr. Bai's expression turned ugly. General Emoku was the most elite warrior of the Mok clan. In the past, the Mok clan's clan leader and 12 other General Emoka had blocked him and Weiyang Sky. Opposite Mr. Bai, Emogio laughed. "Stay here." A Gue suddenly charged over with his scythe. The battle had begun. Emogio glanced at a Gue, who was standing with General Emoku, and said softly, "A Gue can still fight." As he said this, he looked at Mr. Bai. "Don't even think about it, Mr. Bai. This time, the Mok clan has made thorough preparations. Let's see if the invincible Weiyang Palace Lord can hold on." Mr. Bai ignored Emogio and looked at Weiyang Sky in the sky. Weiyang Sky was already wrapped in layers of black chains, and the 4 black-robed sacred sorcerers were muttering something. She glanced at her surroundings, and in the next moment, She punched out. Boom. The entire sky shook violently, and the black chains shattered. However, they were repaired in an instant. Suddenly, a strange aura was emitted from within the chains. As these auras appeared, Endless Heaven frowned slightly because she felt that her lifespan was rapidly depleting. Weiyang Sky frowned slightly. Is this an ancient secret technique? As she said this, she glanced at the chains, which were covered with all sorts of strange runes. Weiyang Sky sneered. Every chain is a creation realm treasure. An ancient secret technique coupled with so many creation realm treasures. I have to say, you guys have really put in a lot of effort to kill me. Not far away, the Mo clan's clan leader, Mo Tianqi, said calmly, Weiyang Palace Lord's strength is extraordinary. We don't dare to underestimate you. Weiyang Sky slowly closed her eyes. The next moment, she slowly raised both her hands. The next moment, the surroundings began to shake violently. Seeing this, Mo Tianqi narrowed his eyes. The four sacred sorcerers hurriedly chanted their incantations, and soon, a mysterious force appeared around Weiyang Sky. Weiyang Sky suddenly said softly, "Destroy." As she said this, she pressed her hands down lightly. As Weiyang Sky's voice fell, the space around her began to be destroyed. Seeing this, the expression of one of the sacred sorcerers changed. Lend us a hand. As soon as the sacred sorcerer finished speaking, Mo Tianqi waved his right hand. In an instant, an enormous black umbrella enveloped Weiyang Sky. The space beneath the black umbrella dimmed as if it was being corroded. At the same time, the space around Weiyang Sky suddenly began to shrink, and the speed of the destruction instantly dropped. However, it didn't vanish, and it just slowed down. Mo Tianqi looked at the four sacred sorcerers. Faster! The four sacred sorcerers started chanting faster, and it didn't take long for the chains that trapped Weiyang Sky to start trembling violently. Moreover, even the heavens and the earth started to tremble. Moreover, countless mountains in the surroundings started to crumble. An ancient secret technique could cause the heavens and the earth to change. The expressions of Mr. Bai and the others darkened when they saw this. Weiyang Sky, who was surrounded, was extremely calm. She glanced coldly at the four sacred sorcerers, and then she suddenly opened her right hand. It didn't take long for countless bolts of lightning to appear in the sky above the Great Burial Wall. In an instant, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky, and it seemed like the end of the world had arrived. Weiyang Sky suddenly raised her head and clenched her fist. Fall! Bang! Countless bolts of lightning rained down from the sky like a torrential storm. Mo Tianqi's expression changed slightly when he witnessed this scene. In the next moment, he shot into the sky and raised his hands. For a time, countless strands of energy swiftly converged in the surroundings and formed a thick barrier that forcefully blocked the lightning. However, Mo Tianqi's face gradually turned pale. Obviously, it was slightly strenuous for him. Meanwhile, Mr. Bai was about to attack, but a middle-aged man stood in front of him. Mr. Bai gazed at the middle-aged man. Mo Xiao. Mo Xiao smiled. Mr. Bai, neither of us will be able to attack today. As he spoke, he gazed at Weiyang Sky. My clan paid such a huge price, so she must die today. In the distance, within the black chains, the space around Weiyang Sky started to turn illusory. At the same time, her body also started to become blurry. Next to Weiyang Sky, a sacred sorcerer suddenly laughed sinisterly. Weiyang Sky, my otherworld originally only wanted Yi Xian dead, but you protected her time and time again. You even invaded my otherworld and killed countless of our experts. Today, the old man will make you pay with blood. At this moment, the space behind the old man suddenly split open, and a woman walked out. The newcomer was none other than Endless Heaven's clone, and Endless Heaven's clone held a bloody head in his hand. This head belonged to the Mo clan expert who went to stop Weiyang Sky. Weiyang Sky's clone casually tossed the bloody head to the ground. In the next moment, she suddenly disappeared. The trapped Weiyang Sky suddenly closed her eyes. In the next moment, she suddenly opened her eyes and slapped her right hand to the right. Boom! The black chains shattered with a loud rumble. As for the 4 saint sorcerers, they were forced to retreat several hundred meters away from the impact. Retreat. One of the sacred sorcerers made a prompt decision and turned to leave. The other 3 also left immediately without any hesitation. Retreat. Not far away, Wei Xianxia's lips curled into a mocking smile. She suddenly disappeared, and in the next moment, 4 shrill screams came from the horizon. Soon, Wei Xianxia appeared again. Her gaze fell on Xianxia, and the latter's expression changed. He was about to speak, but Wei Xianxia raised her hand and slapped him. Boom! The space where Xianxia was instantly collapsed, and he fell into the spatial black hole. However, at this moment, a hand suddenly appeared in the spatial black hole, and soon Xianxia was pulled out by this hand. At this moment, an old man appeared in front of Wei Xianxia. The old man had a hunched back and held a wooden cane in his hand. He looked extremely old. Xianxia, who was rescued by the old man, hurriedly bowed to the old man. "Greetings, patriarch," the hunchbacked old man said softly. As she said, "You are indeed much weaker than your father." Xianxia's expression turned ugly. The hunchbacked old man said, "If we want to conquer the never-ending starfield, we can only rely on ourselves. Do you understand?" Xianxia hurriedly nodded and stood respectfully behind the old man. The hunchbacked old man's gaze fell on Wei Xianxia. "Weiyang, this time, you will lose to the younger generation." As he spoke, he looked down at Xianxia. "It's time for you to make a move." Xianxia smiled, then looked at Burial Wall. "Is there anyone from the younger generation of the never-ending starfield who wants to fight?" As he spoke, he paused, then said, "Why don't you all come at me together?" P.S. There is one more chapter. Checking, updating immediately. Chapter 472. Tack together. Along with Xia's voice, the battlefield suddenly quieted down. Arrogant. One had to admit that Xia's words were very arrogant. How could the people from Warring Sky Great Wall endure it? Soon, a man flew out from the city. However, Xia suddenly disappeared at this moment. When he reappeared, his hand was already on the man's throat. Under everyone's gaze, Xia's right hand tightened slightly. Crack! The man's head fell from his neck. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the people on Barry Sky Great Wall turned solemn. Instant kill. This was an instant kill. Xia casually tossed the head to the ground and said softly, "Next." On the city wall, Zhan Tian and the others looked to the other side. There, Zhou Shengsheng was still fighting with the foreign genius. The 2 of them had been fighting for a long time, but a victor had yet to be decided. Meanwhile, Baldy was about to go down but was stopped by the war army. The war army looked at Baldy and shook his head. "Don't throw your life away." Baldy sighed softly. "What's worse than death is having no one go down." Saying this, he directly leaped off the city wall. However, at this moment, a figure flew over from the distant horizon. When everyone saw the person, they immediately boiled over. Soon, a white-clothed man appeared in front of Xia. The man in white was around 20 years old. His clothes were as white as snow and spotless. In his hand he held a silver spear. The tip of the spear flickered with a cold light. Shuebai. There was another person behind Shuebai. This person wore a black brocade robe and held a black folding fan in his hand. The corner of his mouth had a trace of demonic charm. Xia looked at Shuebai and said softly, "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Shuebai looked at Xia. "I heard that you're the #1 genius of the Moke clan." Xia smiled. "It's just an empty title." Shuebai said, "I hope you're not too weak." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly thrust his spear. The spear was as fast as lightning and couldn't be seen by the naked eye. However, Shuebai's expression quickly changed. Because his spear was directly caught by Xia's 2 fingers. Everyone stared at Xia. At this moment, the devilish smile on the face of the man in the brocade robe behind Shuebai disappeared. In front of Shuebai, Xia softly said, "If that's all you have, then I'm really disappointed." As soon as he finished speaking, his 2 fingers trembled slightly. Bang! The long spear shook violently and a powerful force swept towards Shuebai. Shuebai's expression didn't change. He pulled his hand back and used his palm to block the spear tip. Then he pushed it forward. Boom! Two powerful forces erupted. At this moment, Shuebai dodged to the side, and a fist brushed past his face. When Shuebai was about to counterattack, the fist suddenly turned into a palm and shook to the right. Boom! The space within 1,000 feet of the square garden shook violently. When the space returned to normal, Shuebai was already 1,000 feet away. Seeing this scene, everyone's faces darkened. On top of the city wall, Lien Wanli's gaze landed on Xianxia. He said softly, "Very strong. Very strong indeed." Yi Xian's voice resounded by Lien Wanli's side. Lien Wanli looked at Yi Xian. "Are your injuries healed?" Yi Xian nodded. "They're almost healed." Lien Wanli nodded slightly, and then he looked at Xianxia. "This person is unfathomable." Yi Xian nodded. Although he hadn't fought with Xianxia before, he knew that Xia's strength was extremely powerful. If he wasn't strong, then Zhuqing and the others wouldn't be willing to follow him. Now that he saw Xianxia attack, he was still slightly shocked because Xia's attack was very strange. It was slightly similar to a gue from before. It was as if Xianxia knew what you were going to do next. Moreover, Xia's speed was extremely fast. Lien Wanli suddenly asked, "What are your chances of winning if you fight him?" Yi Xian replied, 100%. Lien Wanli turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked down and said softly, "I'll release the 5th floor. All of you will die." Lien Wanli was speechless. At this moment, the Emperor Hound's voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind. "Big brother, do you think the 5th floor belongs to you?" Yi Xian was speechless. Below, Xianxia walked towards Shuebai. He walked very calmly, and there wasn't the slightest energy fluctuation coming from his body. Shuebai calmly looked at Xianxia. His right hand tightly gripped the long spear in his hand. When the two of them were 10 feet apart, Shuebai suddenly thrust his spear forward. In an instant, hundreds of Shuebai appeared on the battlefield. And these Shuebais all did the same action. They thrust their spears towards Xianxia in front of them. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression suddenly turned serious. Because even he couldn't tell which of these clones was real and which was fake. Below, Xianxia slowly closed his eyes. In the next moment, he moved. In front of everyone's eyes, he began to throw a punch. His punch was very slow, but a strange scene appeared. The afterimages of Shuebai in front of Xianxia began to disappear one after another. In less than a quarter of an hour, all the afterimages around Shuebai had disappeared. On the city wall, Lien Wanli softly said, "Interesting." Yi Xian nodded. "There are many geniuses in this world." Before this, he felt that he was already very monstrous. At least among those of the same rank, it would be hard to find a match for him. But now, he realized that it wasn't that he was invincible among those of the same rank, but that he hadn't met anyone stronger. There is always someone better than you out there. Below, Xianxia looked at Shuebai who wasn't far away and shook his head. "I'm a little disappointed because you're still stuck on these illusions." As his voice faded, he suddenly disappeared. His speed was so fast that no one could see him clearly. Opposite Xianxia, Shuebai's expression changed. He thrust his spear forward with his right hand. The spear was like a dragon, and cold light flickered. At this moment, Xia's fist landed on the tip of Shuebai's spear. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, Shuebai retreated rapidly. This time, he retreated into Berry Sky City. The place suddenly became quiet. In the air, the elder in front of Wei Yang Tian softly said, "Palace Master Wei Yang, how is my junior?" Wei Yang Tian looked at Xianxia below. "Not bad." The hunchbacked elder smiled and said, "It's his honor to be recognized by Palace Master Wei Yang." Wei Yang Tian didn't say anything. She slowly closed her eyes. The battle between the Moke clan and the never-ending Star region wasn't just a battle between the older generation, but also a battle between the younger generation. Before this, The younger generation of the never-ending star region didn't lose to the younger generation of the Mok clan. But now, Xia's appearance had broken this balance. Who could stop Xia? Below, Xia slowly walked towards Bai, who wasn't far away. He walked very calmly. Not far away, Bai held his spear tightly in his right hand and remained silent. At this moment, Xia suddenly stopped. Bai lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and his entire body turned into a black line that shot out. Spear. The tip of his spear tore everything in its path. In the distance, Xia stretched out his right hand and clenched it lightly. Trut. His voice fell. Boom. The space within a radius of a few hundred feet shook violently. Then, layers of space condensed and stacked on top of each other. In an instant, heaven and earth became distorted and illusory. Bai stopped. He was forced to stop by the layers of space. At this moment he was less than 10 feet away from Xia, and his spear was only a few inches away from Xia. At this moment, Bai suddenly roared angrily and swept the spear in his hand. Boom! The surrounding space trembled violently, and the surrounding space began to crack. Xia looked at Bai, but he didn't show any signs of attacking. At this moment, Bai suddenly leaped up and smashed his spear down at Xia. Xia didn't dodge, and he let Bai's spear smash down. Under everyone's gaze, Bai's spear directly hit Xia's head. Boom! The surrounding space trembled violently, but Xia was unharmed. On the contrary, Bai's spear actually cracked. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression darkened. What is this? Bai's eyes were also filled with disbelief. He couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing. Xia took his attack head-on. How is this possible? Bai stared at Xia. The place was incomparably quiet. Everyone on the burial sky Great Wall was also silent. In the sky, Wei Yang Tian said softly, "Heaven and Earth Dharma Body." Opposite Wei Yang Tian, the hunchbacked old man smiled and said, "Palace Master Wei Yang has a good eye." Wei Yang Tian looked down, and no one knew what he was thinking. On the burial sky Great Wall, Little Soul's voice suddenly rang in Xian's mind. "Young Lord, this is a Heaven and Earth Dharma Body." Xian frowned slightly. "What's a Heaven and Earth Dharma Body?" Little Soul said, "The so-called Heaven and Earth Dharma Body is to borrow the power of heaven and earth to cultivate oneself. This is something that manifestation realm experts dream of. Many manifestation realm experts spend their entire lives and still can't cultivate this body. But this person below, he is only in the saint realm, but he has cultivated this body. It can be said that he is almost invincible in the manifestation realm." Speaking up to here, she paused and said, "Young Lord, this person can cultivate this body in the saint realm. This is very unusual." Xian nodded and said, "I understand." Below, Xia walked towards Bai. Bai stared at Xia, his right hand tightly gripping the long spear in his hand. The long spear seemed to sense its master's intent and began to tremble violently. Xia's expression was calm. He walked in front of Bai, and Bai suddenly thrust his spear forward. With one thrust, heaven and earth changed color. Pure power. Even a manifestation realm expert would find it difficult to resist this spear. However, at this moment, Xia suddenly clenched his right hand. This clench seemed to grasp the world in his hand, and the surrounding space directly became illusory. In the next moment, he suddenly punched forward. Boom! In front of everyone's eyes, the long spear in Bai's hand suddenly shattered. At the same time, he directly flew out and finally smashed into the burial sky Great Wall's wall. Blood slowly flowed out of Bai's mouth. Xia walked to the front of the wall. He did not attack Bai, but looked up at Xian on the wall. "Come down." At this moment, everyone's eyes fell on Xian. P.S. Recently, every update will be checked. If there are any typos or mistakes, everyone can leave a comment in the book review section, and I will correct it in time. I will also check every update. Thank you. Chapter 473. Challenge Xian. Everyone's gaze fell on Yi Xian. Indeed, after Shui Bai's defeat, the only ones in Burial Sky Great Wall's younger generation that could fight were Yi Xian and Zhou Xingxing, who was still fighting. Zhou Xingxing, on the other hand, was still fighting. Moreover, Zhou Xingxing was ranked below Shui Bai. Therefore, the only one in Burial Sky Great Wall's younger generation that still had some hope was undoubtedly Yi Xian. On the city wall, beside Yi Xian, Lian Wanli said, "I'll go." As she spoke, she was about to go down the city wall, but Yi Xian pulled her arm at this moment. Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "He's looking for me, so naturally I'll go." As he spoke, he leaped down the city wall and walked in front of Shui Bai. He took out a healing fruit and handed it to Shui Bai. Shui Bai looked at Yi Xian and said, "Very strong." Yi Xian nodded, "I know." As he spoke, he turned around and walked towards Emosia. Emosia looked at the approaching Yi Xian and softly said, "Before, I thought Shui Bai was my opponent. Unfortunately, he disappointed me a little. Now, I hope." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "What's the point of talking so much nonsense? Let's just fight." As he spoke, he suddenly raised his sword and charged at Emosia. What he hated the most was talking a lot before a battle. Yi Xian's speed was extremely fast. He instantly arrived in front of Emosia and slashed down. A very fast slash. However, Emosia didn't dodge, allowing Yi Xian's slash to land on his head. Boom! As the slash landed, Yi Xian's arms violently shook. At this moment, Emosia's fist suddenly landed on Yi Xian's abdomen. However, at this moment, numerous flying swords slashed at various vital points on Emosia's body. Yi Xian retreated rapidly, and with this retreat, he directly retreated to the bottom of the city wall. Several sword lights crisscrossed around Emosia's body. A moment later, several sword scars appeared on his body. Seeing this, the faces of everyone on the wall turned dark. The Dharma body of heaven and earth was an invincible existence. In the air, in front of endless sky, the hunchbacked elder smiled and said, "Swordsman? Over the years, other than the Sky Realm Swordmaster, there haven't been any good swordsmen in the never-ending star domain." As he spoke, he looked at endless sky. "Palace Master Endless Sky, how long do you think that swordsman can last?" Endless Sky remained expressionless. Her gaze was fixed on Yi Xian, and no one knew what she was thinking. Below, Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and chuckled. He was starting to like this feeling. The feeling of battle and madness. What did he rely on to survive time and time again in Qing City? It was ruthlessness and madness. When two sides fought, there were many factors that determined life and death. And most importantly, it depended on whether you were ruthless enough, whether you were crazy enough. Yi Xian raised his sword and suddenly disappeared. A wisp of sword light flashed across the battlefield. The moment Yi Xian disappeared, Emosia slowly closed his eyes. In the next moment, he clenched his right hand forward. This clench directly grabbed a sword light, and then he lightly exerted force. Boom! The sword light shattered. However, at this moment, Yi Xian's soul suddenly left his body. In the next moment, Yi Xian's sword stabbed into Emosia's chest. When the sword stabbed into Emosia's chest, it was like stabbing into solid dark steel. Yi Xian's entire right arm went numb. Emosia was about to attack when his expression suddenly changed. He dodged backwards, and with this flash, his soul actually left his body. However, very quickly, his soul returned to his body. At the same time, he retreated 100 meters, pulling away from Yi Xian. Emosia looked at the distant Yi Xian. "Your sword technique, so strange." In the distance, Yi Xian was silent. One sword soul setting. Yi Xian did not use the soul suppressing sword, but instead used the one sword soul setting technique. Emosia cultivated the heaven and earth Dharma body, and his body was basically invincible. However, Yi Xian did not believe that his soul was invincible as well. His sword originally wanted to stop the opponent's soul, but he did not expect Emosia's reaction speed to be so fast. His soul left his body, causing his sword to stop the air. In the air, the hunchbacked old man across from Wei Yang Tian slightly frowned, this sword technique? Wei Yongtian looked at the old man and lightly said, "Everything is possible, right?" The hunchbacked old man laughed. "Really? Then let us wait and see." After saying that, he looked at Yi Xian and Xie below. Below, Xie began to walk towards Yi Xian. His right hand was clenched tightly behind his back. An aura appeared out of nowhere. This aura was like a volcano that had accumulated for 10,000 years suddenly erupting. The moment it appeared, the surrounding space directly undulated. And with every step Xie took, this aura would strengthen a little. The aura of heaven and earth. In the air, Mr. Bai suddenly said softly. His expression became increasingly solemn. The aura of heaven and earth. This was not borrowing the aura of heaven and earth, but controlling the aura of heaven and earth. This was extremely terrifying. In other words, although Xie had not reached the manifestation realm, he already had the strength of the manifestation realm. Moreover, he was even more terrifying than the manifestation realm. A true monster. Mr. Bai's gaze fell on Yi Xian, a trace of worry and helplessness in his eyes. It had to be said that Yi Xian was also very outstanding, very outstanding. However, he was born in the wrong era. The geniuses born in the same era as Xie were all tragic. That was what Mr. Bai thought in his heart. Below, the space around Yi Xian had already begun to crack due to Xie's aura. Not only that, the aura enveloped Yi Xian, causing him to almost be unable to breathe at this moment. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed his sword into the ground. Boom! A powerful sword aura swept out from the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Sword aura. However, this sword aura was quickly suppressed by Xie's aura. In the air, the hunchbacked old man chuckled. How can a single person's aura resist the aura of heaven and earth? Wei Yongtian looked at Yi Xian below, his face a little gloomy. Below, after Yi Xian discovered that his sword aura was suppressed, he fell silent. At this moment, he thought of the plain-dressed woman. It was the first time he had seen the woman in a plain dress. The plain-dressed woman stood at the bow of the boat. With a shout, the river water was drained and condensed into her sword. Under her sword, everything in the world was so fragile. Yi Xian looked at the sword in his hand. It was a normal sword. Yi Xian looked at the sword in his hand. It was an ordinary sword. The sword is strong because of the person. The sword is strong because of the person. The sword is strong because of the person. If one was strong, even a blade of grass could destroy the heavens and earth. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and looked at Xie in the distance. He tightly grasped the sword in his hand. At this moment, there was only one belief in his heart. Fight. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and looked at the nearby Xie. In the next moment, a powerful sword aura swept out from his body. Apart from that, there was also a black and white sword intent. Good and evil sword intent. The sword intent that he had dispersed before appeared again. As these two sword intents appeared, a sword cry suddenly resounded through the sky. In the air, Wei Yongtian for the first time, a smile appeared on her face. The aura of heaven and earth? As she spoke, she looked at the hunchbacked old man. Have you never heard of the saying that man can conquer nature? As cultivators, if we don't have the heart to defy the heavens, what's the point of cultivating? The hunchbacked old man was expressionless. It's just a mental breakthrough. So what? Wei Yongtian looked down, then let us wait and see. The hunchbacked old man also looked down. Below, the sword aura that Yi Xian emitted was getting stronger and stronger. In the end, his sword aura had completely blocked Xie's powerful aura. Yi Xian raised his sword and walked towards Xie. In his hand, the immortal soul sword trembled violently. Xie glanced at Yi Xian. In the next moment he suddenly leaped up. In the air, his right palm faced upwards. However, in the next moment he suddenly slammed his palm down. Boom! When this palm landed, it was as if it was going to shatter the heavens and earth. A powerful force swept down from the sky. Everywhere it passed, the space cracked inch by inch. Below, Yi Xian's mouth curved into a sinister smile. He stomped his right foot and transformed into a sword light that soared into the sky. One sword to decide life and death. This time, he knew very clearly that if he lost, he would definitely die. This time, if he couldn't decide the opponent's life and death, then he would have to die. At this moment, there was only one thought left in Yi Xian's mind. Fight. As Yi Xian soared into the sky with his sword in hand, a sword cry reverberated through the sky. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Xian's sword tore through the air. Finally, his sword stabbed into Xia's palm. Boom! The heavens and earth violently shook. With the two of them as the center, the space within 1,000 feet instantly collapsed into a spider web shape. In front of Yi Xian, Xia coldly stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's sword was ultimately unable to pierce through his skin. However, the powerful force contained in Yi Xian's sword violently shook his body. The force was so powerful that he didn't dare to underestimate it. Xia's palm firmly blocked Yi Xian's sword. Suddenly, he abruptly grabbed Yi Xian's sword and slid forward. His palm slammed into Yi Xian's chest. However, practically at the same time, numerous flying swords directly slashed at Xia's vitals. Boom! Both of them rapidly retreated. As they retreated, Yi Xian put his fingers together and pointed forward. Streaks of sword light flew towards Xia like lightning. They were extremely fast and instantly arrived in front of Xia. Xia's palm faced forward. Stop! As his voice fell, all the flying swords were frozen in place. Spatial power. Xia's palm lightly pressed forward. Go! As his voice fell, all the flying swords flew back and slashed straight at Yi Xian. Their speed was extremely fast. They weren't any slower than Yi Xian's flying swords. However, these flying swords had just arrived in front of Yi Xian and silently disappeared. Xia looked at the distant Yi Xian and softly said, I have to say, you're really tenacious. Moreover, it seems that the more you fight, the more powerful you become. As he spoke, his right hand slowly clenched. Fortunately, I didn't underestimate you in the beginning. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have suffered a great loss. The heaven and earth Dharma body didn't mean invincibility. Yi Xian's sword could already hurt him. And if he had underestimated Yi Xian in the slightest, this underestimation might have cost him his life. Never underestimate the enemy. This was his warning to himself. Xia suddenly raised his right hand and looked at Yi Xian from afar. He contemptuously said, It's time to end this. As his voice fell, his right hand suddenly opened. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian actually began to distort. In the air, Wei Yang Tian seemed to have seen something. Her expression changed and she was about to attack, but the hunchbacked elder blocked in front of her. Chapter 474. In the air, Wei Yang Tian looked at the hunchback elder. The latter said, Palace Master, don't interfere in the fight between the younger generation. Wei Yang Tian frowned slightly. Just as she was about to make a move, she suddenly looked down at Yi Xian. The hunchbacked old man also looked down. Below them, the space around Yi Xian was distorting in a strange way. However, Yi Xian was completely fine at the center. Not only that, but the space around him was slowly returning to normal. The hunchback elder frowned slightly. How is this possible? There was also a trace of astonishment in Wei Yang Tian's eyes. Space. This time, Yi Xian did not use space Dao law. Instead, he purely used the power of space. After cultivating in adversity, his grasp and understanding of the power of space was completely different from before. This time, he was purely using the power of space around him to resist Xia. Under Yi Xian's control, the space around him slowly returned to normal. In the distance, Xia frowned slightly. Soon, the space around Yi Xian returned to normal. Xia looked at Yi Xian. What a surprise! Your use of space has reached this level. Yi Xian raised his sword and walked towards Xia. Cut the crap. Let's continue. With that, he stomped his right foot. Boom! The space beneath his feet shook. Yi Xian turned into a sword light and shot out. In the distance, Xia clenched her right hand into a fist and punched out. Boom! The world shook violently. This punch forced Yi Xian to stop. However, the moment Yi Xian stopped, his soul suddenly left his body. At the same time, a sword slashed towards Xie. Xie, who wanted to take it head-on, suddenly changed his expression. In the next moment, his body shook and he flashed back 100 feet. This sword was a soul-fixing sword. Hence, Xie did not choose to take it head-on. He did not dare to because this sword targeted the soul. His heaven and earth body was useless before this sword. His retreat gave Yi Xian a chance. As soon as Xie stopped, several beams of sword light suddenly slashed his body. At the same time, Yi Xian appeared in front of him again. Then, he thrust his sword straight at him. This sword was aimed at the space between the eyebrows. It was still the soul-sealing sword. Xie didn't choose to retreat again. His two hands clasped together and directly clasped Yi Xian's sword. At the same time, he pressed forward and slammed into Yi Xian's body. Bang! Yi Xian retreated rapidly. Xie was about to follow up with another attack, but two sword lights suddenly appeared above his head. Bang! The sword light shattered. However, Xie still managed to forcefully retreat several meters. With this retreat, the distant Yi Xian pressed forward again. He was extremely fast and arrived in front of Xie in the blink of an eye. At the same time, he slashed at Xie's throat with the immortal spirit sword in his hand. Xie did not dodge and let Yi Xian's sword slash at his throat. However, his fist seemed to land on Yi Xian's abdomen at the same time. Bang! Yi Xian retreated rapidly. With this retreat, he retreated directly to the bottom of the city wall. Xie was just about to rush over when a few flying swords suddenly slashed at him, forcing him to stop in place. Xie looked at Yi Xian, who was at the bottom of the city wall. In the next moment, he disappeared. His entire body flashed past like a beam of light. In the distance, Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He lightly tapped his feet and turned sideways. Xie's foot brushed against the edge of Yi Xian's abdomen and kicked the city wall. Bang! The city wall shook violently and cracked. However, it quickly recovered. Below the city wall, when Xie's kick missed, Yi Xian suddenly slashed horizontally. This sword slashed at Xie's abdomen. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Bang! The sword shook violently. Xie frowned slightly. His arm suddenly swept towards Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian's body bent backwards and directly dodged this punch. At the same time, several flying swords suddenly slashed at Xie's throat and forehead. Bang bang bang, the sword light shattered, but Xie was also forced back several meters. However, in the next moment he suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He held his sword with both hands and slashed forward. One sword soul setting. Seeing this sword, Xie, who had just rushed in front of Yi Xian, slightly changed his expression. His figure flashed backwards. This flash was a full 30 meters. Facing Yi Xian's one sword soul setting, he did not dare to take it head-on. However, he could still dodge it. In the distance, Yi Xian raised his sword and walked towards Xie. At this moment, his expression was grave. He had to admit that Xie was the strongest person he had ever seen in the young generation. Though the opponent did not dare to take his one sword soul setting, the opponent's speed and battle reaction were extremely fast. He could dodge the sword. As long as it was not one sword soul setting, the opponent dared to take it head-on. However, he could not keep using this one sword soul setting because it consumed too much energy. In this battle, Yi Xian knew clearly that there were no shortcuts. He could only fight head-on. When he was dozens of meters in front of Xie, Yi Xian's right foot suddenly stomped down, and his entire body became a sword light that shot towards Xie. Almost at the same time, Xie suddenly disappeared. The two of them fought again. In the air, Wei Yang Tian and the hunchback old man silently looked down. Wei Yang Tian was expressionless, while the hunchback old man's expression was slightly gloomy. He never imagined that Yi Xian would be so tenacious and fight Xie to a standstill. Moreover, he noticed that Yi Xian was growing stronger the more he fought. In the battlefield, everyone was looking at Wuxia and Xianxia outside the city wall. The two of them had already entered into close combat. Wuxia's physical body was invincible, her battle reaction speed was extremely fast, and her adaptability was terrifying. Meanwhile, Xianxia's sword technique was sharp, and every strike was aimed at vital points. Especially his flying sword, Xianxia's flying sword was truly too elusive. Every time it appeared, it was impossible to defend against. Looking at Xianxia's flying sword, everyone in the battlefield was filled with fear. If it wasn't for Wuxia who had cultivated a heaven and earth body, no one could fight Xianxia in close combat. Right now, Xianxia was extremely terrifying in close combat. Boom! At this moment, a huge explosion suddenly came from below. As the explosion resounded, Xianxia and Wuxia retreated rapidly. With this retreat, the two of them retreated nearly 300 meters. As Xianxia retreated, flying sword after flying sword slashed towards the nearby Wuxia like bolts of lightning. Wuxia punched out with both fists. For a time, explosions resounded incessantly in the battlefield. Soon, Wuxia stopped. The sword flashes in front of him had all shattered. However, at this moment, Xianxia suddenly appeared in front of him. Wuxia narrowed his eyes and suddenly disappeared, throwing a punch towards Xianxia's chest. An extremely fast punch. However, at the moment he punched out, Xianxia suddenly stabbed his sword towards his throat. This time, it was soul-setting strike. However, this time, Wuxia didn't dodge. Neither of them dodged. They were going to exchange lives for lives. Wuxia knew very well that if he dodged, it would be extremely difficult for him to kill Xianxia. Meanwhile, it was the same for Xianxia. He knew that if he dodged this punch, then he would be completely suppressed. Moreover, he would be crushed in terms of aura as well. At that time, he would definitely die. So, he couldn't retreat. Everyone in the surroundings held their breaths at the sight of this. This time, it might really be a matter of life and death. Under everyone's gazes, Xianxia's sword stabbed into Wuxia's throat. Wuxia's body shook violently. At this moment, he was like a block of wood because his soul had been locked in place within his body. At this moment, he couldn't move at all. This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page. At the same time, his soul was ceaselessly turning illusory. At practically the same time, Wuxia's fist smashed into Xianxia's abdomen. Xianxia's entire body instantly flew backwards like a kite with a broken string. In the air, Xianxia's body began to crack inch by inch. Blood splattered everywhere. It was an incomparably terrifying sight. Finally, Xianxia heavily smashed into the city wall behind him. Boom! The city wall violently shook and countless cracks appeared. Xianxia laid on the ground as blood constantly flowed out of his body. Not long after, the ground beneath him was dyed red with blood. Xianxia felt as if his entire body had been shattered, including his organs. He didn't even have the strength to move a finger. Xianxia's eyes were tightly shut. In his mind, names kept appearing. Ling, in Lanxiu, Mo Yunqi, Jiangjiu, Beizhe. Thinking of these people, Xianxia, who was about to fall unconscious, suddenly clenched his fists. In the next moment, a pile of purple source crystals appeared in front of his chest. Then, he automatically began to absorb these purple source crystals. He didn't want to die. Xianxia still didn't want to die. He wanted to live. The powerful desire to live caused Xianxia to forcefully resist the urge to sleep. Because he knew very well that if he fell asleep, he would never wake up again. Xianxia tightly clenched his teeth. His hands were also tightly clenched. This was the last bit of his strength. But for himself, and for his sister. In the distance, Wuxia's soul in his body began to flicker. Clearly, he was also forcefully protecting his soul. However, his soul was still slowly fading away. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before Wuxia's soul completely disappeared. At that time, his soul would truly be destroyed. The surroundings were incomparably quiet. Everyone was looking at Wuxia and Xianxia, the two most monstrous people in the world. In the sky, Mr. Bai suddenly stood up and looked at the hunchbacked old man above. Will the battle between the two of them end here? The hunchbacked old man looked at Xie below and fell silent. After a moment, the hunchbacked old man nodded. Clearly, he didn't want Xie to die here. However, at this moment, Xie's soul suddenly softly said, "It's not over yet." Everyone looked at Xie below. Xie looked at Yixian on the ground and softly said, "Our battle is not over yet." The moment she finished speaking, the space beside her suddenly split open. In the next moment, a demon beast suddenly leaped out. Evil Qilin. Seeing this, Mr. Bai and the others' expressions changed. Xie softly said, "It's my demon beast, it doesn't count as an outsider helping." As he spoke, he looked at the distant Yixian. "It's over." The moment he finished speaking, the evil Qilin charged straight at the nearby Yixian. Seeing this, Mr. Bai and the others' expressions changed. They were about to attack, but the Mo clan's experts all blocked in front of them. Beside Wei Yangtian, the hunchbacked old man stared at her. The moment she moved, he would immediately stop her. However, Wei Yangtian had no intention of attacking. Below, just as the evil Qilin was about to reach in front of Yixian, a black light suddenly flashed out of Yixian's body. In the next moment, a demon beast appeared in front of Yixian. Emperor Hound. On the ground, Yixian softly said, "Brother Emperor, kill it." Emperor Hound shook its head. It looked at the evil Qilin with a strange smile on its face. "This is a female one." Yixian. P.S. Asking for votes? I'm not asking. End of this chapter. Chapter 475. The female. Yixian's face darkened. This fellow wouldn't betray him, would it? However, he couldn't care less at the moment. All he wanted to do now was lie down and recuperate. He still couldn't feel his own body. This time, his injuries were really serious. More seriously than ever before. Everyone in Buried Sky City breathed a sigh of relief when the Emperor Hound appeared. However, they were curious as to why Yixian had a demonic beast. Aside from curiosity, they were also a little worried. The Emperor Hound looked much worse than the evil Kirin. It wasn't as big as the evil Kirin either. However, the Emperor Hound didn't fear the ancient demonic beast in front of it at all. The Emperor Hound. It was also a demonic beast from the ancient times. In the air, opposite Wei Yangtian, the hunchbacked elder frowned as he looked at the Emperor Hound. After a while, he looked at Wei Yangtian. "What demonic beast is this? Why have I never seen it before, old man?" Wei Yangtian said calmly, "The world is vast, and you and I are both insignificant." The hunchbacked elder frowned slightly. Below, the evil Kirin in front of the Emperor Hound suddenly roared. It glared at the Emperor Hound with a murderous look in its eyes. The corner of the Emperor Hound's mouth cracked open, revealing a row of fangs as sharp as blades. After a moment of silence, the two demonic beasts disappeared from where they stood. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion resounded. Soon, the two demonic beasts were engaged in a fierce battle. Both of them were extremely powerful, and they both relied on their physical bodies. It was a head-on clash. As soon as the battle began, the surrounding space began to tremble violently, as if it was about to shatter. It was extremely frightening. Seeing that the Emperor Hound wasn't any weaker than the evil Kirin, Mr. Bai and the others breathed a sigh of relief. In the air, Wei Yangtian suddenly looked at the hunchbacked elder not far away. "Since the juniors can't decide a winner, let us do it." The hunchbacked elder said softly, "All right. I also want to see how much Palace Master Wei Yang's strength has grown over the years." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. Wei Yangtian also disappeared with him. In next to no time, numerous deafening explosions resounded incessantly in the distant sky. Below, Mr. Bai suddenly looked at Emojio and said, "Come on." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. In the distance, the experts from the Moke clan also disappeared. The battle began. This time, it was a true all-out war. Under the city wall, Yi Xian was still lying quietly, and the war army and others had rushed out. Lian Wanli stood beside Yi Xian. She held the azure dragon saber and just stood there. Zuoqing stood quietly beside Mo Xie in the distance. Mo Xie had forcefully withstood Yi Xian's soul-setting sword. Even now, his soul was still a bit illusory. Fortunately, it hadn't completely dissipated. Whether it was Yi Xian or Mo Xie, they were both still alive, but both were heavily wounded. Beside Yi Xian, Lian Wanli looked around and said softly, "How intense!" At this moment, she suddenly realized that the war between the Great Cloud Empire and the other countries in the Azure world was simply child's play. She lowered her head and looked at Yi Xian. Actually, she didn't leave the Azure world to find Yi Xian. She just wanted to leave that place and take a look in the starry sky. As it turned out, she had made the right choice. Because if she stayed in the Azure world, she would trap herself to death. At this moment, an expert from the Moke clan suddenly rushed towards Yi Xian. Obviously, he wanted to take this opportunity to kill Yi Xian. Lian Wanli glanced at that person. The next moment, she threw the saber in her hand forward. The saber tore through the sky, tearing everything apart. Boom! In the distance, that expert from the Moke clan was pushed back hundreds of meters by this saber. Lian Wanli clenched her right hand and the Azure Dragon saber returned to her hand. In the distance, none of the experts from the Moke clan dared to come over. Lian Wanli lowered her head and looked at Yi Xian. "How is it?" Yi Xian said softly, "I won't die yet." Lian Wanli nodded and looked around. At this moment, the battle had reached its climax. Both sides were dying. Neither side had a huge advantage. It could only be said that they were evenly matched. Lian Wanli raised her head and looked at the distant starry sky. She knew that if the two of them decided a winner, it would be the end. Who was stronger? Far away in the void, a series of explosions rang out incessantly. The battle was intense. Lian Wanli retracted her gaze and looked at the monarch hound and evil Qilin in the distance. The two evil beasts were also fighting fiercely. It was a stalemate. Lian Wanli still didn't make a move. She just stood there quietly because if she left, Yi Xian would definitely die. This continued for about 2 hours. More and more people died around them. There were people from both sides. Lian Wanli realized that no one escaped from either side. They were all fighting to the death. At this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly raised her head and looked at the sky. There, an expert from the never-ending star field fell from the sky. A creation realm expert. Now, there were already creation realm experts dying. Lian Wanli gripped her saber and remained silent. Yi Xian was still absorbing the purple origin crystals. What he needed to do now was to heal his injuries as soon as possible. On the other side, Mo Xie was also rapidly recovering her soul. Both of them were fighting for time. Meanwhile, Zuoqing and the Earth Fiend were guarding Mo Xie with all their might. After about a market, Yi Xian sat cross-legged while Mo Xie's soul returned to her physical body. However, neither of them made a move. Yi Xian's physical body had yet to fully recover, while Mo Xie's soul had yet to completely merge with her physical body. Moreover, her soul had yet to fully recover. At this moment, boom! In the distant horizon, an explosion suddenly sounded. The next moment, the entire sky began to tremble violently as if there was a huge earthquake. Lian Wanli raised his head and looked at the sky. Soon, the sky began to crack layer by layer. After a while, the entire sky suddenly shattered and turned pitch black. However, the space quickly recovered. At this moment, 2 people appeared in the sky. It was the hunchbacked elder and Wei Yang Tian. Wei Yang Tian was expressionless, while the hunchbacked elder's expression was somewhat solemn. There were 2 reasons for this solemn expression. One was that Wei Yang Tian was powerful, and the other was that the person who should have appeared did not appear. Wei Yang Tian looked at the hunchbacked elder and was about to make a move. At this moment, the hunchbacked elder suddenly said, "Wait, Palace Master Wei Yang." Wei Yang Tian frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" The hunchbacked old man glanced at his surroundings, and his gaze gradually turned cold. At that moment, the surrounding space suddenly trembled violently. As the space trembled, threads of red light that were as thin as needles and threads suddenly seeped out from the surrounding space. Wei Yangtian frowned slightly when she witnessed this scene. She waved her hands and space shattered. However, those threads of red light still remained. Wei Yangtian's frown grew deeper. She suddenly clenched her fists tightly, and then her figure spun. Bang! A powerful stream of air appeared around her, and it ceaselessly resisted the red light. However, it didn't take long for the stream of air to be corroded. Wei Yangtian's expression changed slightly. She waved her hand, and a multicolored jade belt suddenly flew out. In the next moment, the jade belt started to spin madly and resist the red light. However, the jade belt actually started to be corroded bit by the red light. The hunchbacked elder who stood before Wei Yangtian had withdrawn a dark gold shield as well, and it floated around him. However, the shield wasn't able to resist the red light, and it started to be corroded as well. The hunchbacked elder's expression was extremely unsightly when he witnessed this scene. "That's cosmic rays." As he spoke, he glanced around. These people are like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Across from the hunchbacked elder, endless sky coldly scanned the surroundings. "You're the one who attracted them." The hunchbacked elder turned to the right. "Great sovereign, why haven't you come out yet?" Loud laughter suddenly rang out from the distance. Along with this voice, a middle-aged man walked out from the space. The middle-aged man was wearing a white robe, and behind him, there were 6 red-robed elders, each of them wielding a blood-red staff. Other than that, there was a strange red flame floating around them. Most conspicuous of all was the blood-red halo of light beneath their feet. It looked like a formation. Wei Yangtian narrowed her eyes when she saw these 6 people. Divine Sorcerer. Divine Sorcerer. The highest level of Divine Sorcerer in the Outlander territory could be said to be the strongest in the Outlander territory. Every single one of these people possessed supreme secret techniques passed down in the Outlander territory. She hadn't seen a single Divine Sorcerer the last time she went to the Outlander territory, and she had thought it was strange. She hadn't expected that these people would appear here. The white-robed middle-aged man smiled. Great eyesight, Palace Master Wei Yang. Moreover, Palace Master Wei Yang was actually able to resist these cosmic rays, as expected of the strongest expert in this starfield. Meanwhile, the hunchbacked elder spoke abruptly. "Great sovereign, you're going back on your word." The great sovereign looked at the hunchbacked elder and smiled. "Going back on my word? I only promised to join forces with you to destroy Wei Yangtian, but I never said I wouldn't destroy your Moke clan." As he spoke, he glanced at the 2 of them and smiled. "To be honest, if the 2 of you hadn't fought to the point of mutual destruction, we wouldn't have dared to act rashly." Wei Yangtian slowly clenched her right hand and was about to attack when the great sovereign suddenly smiled. "Palace Master Wei Yang, don't waste your strength. These 6 divine sorcerers have exhausted all their strength and used the Outlander Source Spring as the formation core. As long as the 6 of them don't die, the cosmic rays will be endless. You won't be able to stop them." As he spoke up to here, he suddenly looked at Yi Xian below. He sized up Yi Xian and chuckled lightly. "Is this the Yi Xian who possesses a supreme treasure?" Behind the great sovereign, a saint sorcerer nodded. "It's him. We've investigated this person, and there seems to be a mysterious expert behind him, but we don't know the specific identity." The great sovereign chuckled. "To be able to possess such a treasure, this person is naturally not simple. All right, let's cut the crap. Kill this person and that Moke clan's Moxia. These 2 can't be left alive." As the great sovereign's voice fell, 2 afterimages suddenly tore through the sky and descended. One flashed towards Yi Xian's position, and the other towards Moxia's position. Chapter 476. Seeing this scene, Wei Yangtian and the hunchbacked old man's expressions changed. However, as soon as the 2 of them attacked, countless cosmic rays appeared around them and enveloped them like a net. Below, The Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield experts stopped simultaneously. Mr. Bai and the Moke clan's patriarch, Xianxia, took the lead and stood in front of the two black shadows. Boom! As two explosions rang out, the two black shadows were forced to a stop. However, many men in black suddenly appeared in the surroundings below. These men in black wielded longswords and rushed toward Yixian and Xianxia. Seeing this scene, the war army and the others changed their expressions, especially the war army and Baldi, who rushed toward the men in black. On the other side, Zuoqing, Earth Fiend, and the others blocked in front of Xianxia. However, due to the intense battle just now, Zuoqing, Zhanjun, and the others were not in peak condition at all. Hence, the moment they clashed, Zuoqing, Zhanjun, and the others were immediately suppressed. In front of Yixian, Lian Wanli stood quietly with the Azure Dragon Saber in her hand. All of a sudden, Lian Wanli slashed to the right with the long saber. Boom! The space cracked, and an afterimage retreated rapidly from the space. Lian Wanli glanced coldly at the afterimage. You want to kill him? Have you asked this king? As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to rush over with the saber. However, at this moment, she seemed to have thought of something and quickly stopped. Then, she returned to Yixian's side with the saber. In the distance, the black shadow suddenly disappeared. Lian Wanli raised the saber and slashed. Boom! An explosion resounded, and the black shadow was pushed back again. However, the next moment, more than a dozen experts in black appeared around Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli frowned slightly. Fight me one-on-one if you can. The dozen or so people ignored her and rushed towards her. Lian Wanli looked at Yixian. Take care of yourself. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised the saber and slashed forward. Boom! The black-robed man at the forefront was sent flying by Lian Wanli's slash. However, in the next moment, a long sword appeared at the back of her neck. Lian Wanli's reaction was extremely fast. She dodged to the side and directly dodged the sword. At the same time, she swept the Azure Dragon Saber in her hand. Boom! The three black-clothed men were sent flying. But in the next moment, numerous black shadows surrounded Lian Wanli. At the same time, a man in black holding a sword suddenly appeared behind Yixian and stabbed the back of Yixian's neck. Fast, accurate, and ruthless. As the sword stabbed into the ground, a smile appeared on the black-clothed man's face. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. However, in the next moment, his expression changed drastically. He was about to retreat when a flying sword slashed through his throat. The black-robed man glared at Yixian, his eyes filled with disbelief. At this moment, Yixian stood up slowly and turned to look at the man in black. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? The black-clothed man glared at Yixian. Even in death, he didn't understand why Yixian was fine. Yixian's palm suddenly opened. In the next moment, an aura sword flew out from his palm. Dozens of meters away, the head of a black-clothed man fighting with Lian Wanli suddenly flew off. Seeing this, the black-clothed men fighting Lian Wanli changed their expressions and quickly retreated. Lian Wanli looked at Yixian. Done. Yixian nodded. Done. As he spoke, he looked at the nearby Emperor Hound. At this moment, the Emperor Hound wasn't fighting the Black Qilin. The Black Qilin had already returned to Xia's side. However, its eyes were still on the Emperor Hound and Yixian. Its eyes were still filled with hostility and viciousness. The Emperor Hound returned to Yixian. This evil Qilin's bloodline is very pure. It's orthodox. Yixian said, between it and you, whose bloodline is higher? The Emperor Hound fell silent for a moment before it said, it's about the same. Therefore, there's no bloodline suppression between us. As it spoke, it looked up into the sky. Kid, you seem to have a new enemy. A new enemy? Yixian looked up into the sky. At this moment, Wei Yang Tian and the hunchbacked elder from the Moke clan were still trapped. Yixian's expression instantly darkened when he saw Wei Yang Tian trapped. Things are getting serious. In the sky, the white-robed middle-aged man sized up Yixian and smiled. Monstrous indeed. With the speed of this flying sword, There probably aren't many people of the same rank who can resist it. As he spoke, he turned around. Didn't you want to see the geniuses of the never-ending star region? Come out. As soon as he finished speaking, the space nearby suddenly split open, and then a man and a woman walked out. The man wore a black robe, his long hair draped over his shoulders, and a sheathed saber hung from his waist. Meanwhile, the woman beside him wore a tight-fitting lotus leaf dress. Her lips were red, and her teeth were white. She was very beautiful. The man's gaze descended onto Yixian and Xianxia. You choose. The woman beside him looked at Yixian. Him. As soon as she finished speaking, she floated down very slowly like a snowflake falling from the sky. Yixian frowned slightly when he saw this. The emperor hound beside him said, Do you want to fight? Yixian said softly, I won't. Can I? The emperor hound said, I don't think so. That woman is here for you. Yixian was just about to speak when Wanli suddenly said, Ben, this chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. Your Majesty. Yixian looked at Wanli. Wanli blinked. Your Majesty loves to hit women. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised her saber and soared into the sky. The emperor hound looked at Yixian. Yixian took out a pile of purple origin crystals and began absorbing them madly. Healing. He wanted to properly heal now because he realized that he was in a dangerous situation. Very dangerous. Especially when never-ending heaven was trapped. The situation was very serious. Yixian began healing while the emperor hound stood guard by his side. Under such circumstances, many people would definitely want Yixian to die. On the other side, Zuoqing, who was beside Xianxia, also charged towards the black-robed man. Be it Yixian or Xianxia, both of them needed to recuperate at this moment, because their current combat power was undoubtedly very weak. In the sky, the white-robed middle-aged man glanced at Yixian and Xianxia, and then he looked at Wei Yangtian and the hunchbacked old man. Wei Yangtian's face was expressionless. The rainbow ribbon around her was about to be destroyed by the cosmic rays. The hunchbacked old man was the same. His dark golden shield was already turning illusory. The white-robed middle-aged man turned to look at a god sorcerer. Hurry up. The god sorcerer nodded slightly. In the next moment, she started chanting silently. It didn't take long for the sky above the burial sky Great Wall to tremble violently. Right after that, the space above the burial sky Great Wall suddenly cracked open, and countless cosmic rays shot out from within. The expressions of everyone here changed at the sight of this. If the cosmic rays were allowed to descend, the entire burial sky Great Wall would instantly be reduced to ashes. Moreover, everyone here would die. Besides Wei Yangtian and the others, who else could stop the cosmic rays? No one. Yixian had a solemn expression as well. Brother Emperor Hound, can you stop it? The Emperor Hound thought for a moment and said, I can escape. Yixian was speechless. The Emperor Hound gazed at Yixian. Are you going to flee? Yixian glanced at the war army and Baldi who were still fighting in the distance, and he fell silent. The Emperor Hound spoke solemnly, Big brother, we really can't beat them. Yixian spoke softly, Do you think they'll let me go? The Emperor Hound fell silent. Because a part of the reason they'd appeared here was to look for Yixian. So, anyone could flee, but Yixian couldn't. No matter how he fled, they wouldn't let him go. Meanwhile, Yixian stood up and looked up into the sky. He spoke softly, Move aside. I'm going to unleash my ultimate move. The Emperor Hound was speechless. P.S. Save as much as you can for the 15th. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.